681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge, or post your name and number to GB11 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 7th of March. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
Apparently in 1991, I took out an insurance on my computer, which I have no recollection of at all. But recently, I've had a foreign voice ring me and say, unless I pay the £1,000 immediately, they'll take it out of my bank account.
They wouldn't have access to your bank account.
No, they have no access to my bank account. And what you should do, to begin with, you feel frightened. And you think, my God, £1,000 coming up, what do I do? And then Neil, my partner, said, just ignore it. And that's what you've got to do, but they are persistent.
So threatening as well.
And we changed we changed the number and everything, and still, they managed to get through to you, and we told the bank not to accept any £1,000 checks, something like that. But it is awful. But I say to your viewers and listeners, please, please ignore these phone calls.
Yes.
Even if at the end of the day it's true and they do come and collect £1,000 legally, don't do anything about it. Just ignore it.
Yeah. I think there's an organisation you can phone which is anti-scammer.
Is there?
They can do a lot of this stuff for you. I'm no help to you because I don't know what it is.
Well, I might look into that, because it is worrying, you know, to begin with, and then they are so persistent.
Yeah.
That is the thing.
My mum had a similar thing the other day, and this is a good tip to remember. And her bank rang her up and said it was her bank, and they needed to get into her account immediately because someone had hacked her account and they were taking her money out. So it's automatically the panic.
Yeah.
You're losing money.
Yeah.
And they said, just share the one-time password that's about to come to your phone. And at that point, she went, no, you should never share your one-time password.
No.
Anybody asks you to do that, it's a scam.
No,
Phone
exactly.
down.
Yeah.
So just a good one to remember.
Yeah, yeah.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Good afternoon. It's 3 o'clock on Friday, the 21st of February, a week after Valentine's Day, isn't it? Already. Welcome to the Martin Daubney Show on GB News with me, Dawn Neeson, broadcasting live from the heart of Westminster and all across the UK. Your main stories for you this first hour. The PM takes the fight to reform as he tells his cabinet that Labour must stop looking down on working-class voters and start taking their worries about immigration seriously. Has the penny finally dropped, or is it too little too late? And as we cosy up to Brussels, Britain will offer EU countries a youth mobility scheme bringing tens of thousands to our country. Is this the start of that big Brexit betrayal? And in the latest case of have the lunatics taken over the asylum system, spoiler, yes, a Sri Lankan sex offender has been allowed to stay in Britain because he's gay. So is it finally time to leave the ECHR? And this is a sad one. As Labour pulls mental health support cash for farmers amid the inheritance tax raid, I'll be getting the reaction of a farmer whose dad took his own life. That's later on in the show. So, congratulations, you made it to Friday. I know, I never thought we'd do it either. It's been one of those weeks, a tough one, hasn't it? But we're here to keep you company this afternoon, so thank you very much for joining me. Just snuggle up, we've got nowhere to go, put your feet up and relax. Oh, yeah, we're on the radio as well, by the way. Because this show isn't about Martin Daubney, that's him there, he's on holiday, obviously, with the kids, it's half-term. It's not about me, Dawn Neeson, it's about you and your views. And it's really, really simple to get involved in the show and have a chat. Just go, post your comments to gbnews.com/your say. Get involved, what you want to talk about, what we're talking about. It's a Friday afternoon. Let's have a chat, shall we? But first, let's get these news headlines with Sam Francis. Here he is.
Dawn, thank you very much and good afternoon to you. It's just after 3 o'clock. Well, Israel has accused Hamas of violating the ceasefire after a forensic test showed a body returned from Gaza was not that of hostage Shiri Bibas. Her 2 young sons were identified among the remains, along with an 84-year-old man, Oded Lifshitz. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says Hamas put the body of a Gazan woman in a coffin and have now vowed to make the terror group pay the full price. Israel is also demanding the return of Shiri Bibas, whether she is alive or dead. Well, Hamas say the mix-up may have been caused by an Israeli airstrike, and earlier journalist Amir Oren gave us his thoughts.
You have 2 possible hypotheses. One is that the chaos in Gaza is such that the minor organization or actually crime family who originally abducted the Bibas family and then had to give them over to Hamas misplaced the body, or perhaps Hamas later misplaced the body. The other possibility is that Shiri Bibas was abused, molested, or worse.
The BBC has pulled a Gaza documentary from iPlayer after discovering its 13-year-old narrator is the son of a Hamas official. The broadcaster says it wasn't informed of the family connection before airing the programme and is now conducting further due diligence. It comes after Culture Secretary Lisa Nandy and high-profile media figures urged the BBC to investigate how the film was made. The programme was removed today, with the BBC saying it won't return while the review takes place. Sinn Féin are set to boycott White House St Patrick's Day celebrations over Trump's stance on the Israel-Gaza conflict. The party leader, Mary Lou McDonald, says she won't attend an event at the White House because of what she called a principled stance against the expulsion of the Palestinian people from Gaza. However, no invites have officially been issued so far. Let's just turn to some breaking political news here at home. Labour MP Andrew Gwynn, who was sacked over what were described as vile WhatsApp messages, is now under investigation by Parliament's standards watchdog. He was dismissed as a health minister earlier this month after seeing sexist, anti-Semitic and ageist messages, those messages in a group chat with other Labour MPs. The Parliamentary Commissioner for Standards is now probing whether his actions caused significant damage to the reputation of MPs and the House of Commons. Also breaking this hour, the Solicitors Regulation Authority is reopening its investigation into Business Secretary Jonathan Reynolds over claims he misrepresented his legal career. Regulators had initially reviewed the issue and closed that case after Reynolds corrected his professional profiles online, but they've now received new information and say they will be taking another look at that issue. And it's an afternoon of breaking political news. We're just hearing that Sir Keir Starmer has told his ministers to admit that Labour ignored working people's concerns about immigration for too long. In a letter seen this afternoon by GBNews, the Prime Minister says politics became too scared to acknowledge that some migrants are genuine refugees, but some aren't. He's warning that Labour must stop patronising voters and prove that Reform UK's policies on tax and the NHS are not the answer. And in that letter, citing a woman in Oldham, he says people feel they must justify their concerns to avoid being labelled racist. And he's also pledged to stand up for ordinary people who feel shut out and ignored by elites. Volodymyr Zelensky has told Donald Trump's envoy that Ukraine needs reliable security guarantees before any peace deal with Russia. It comes as the White House cancelled a conference with Zelensky after Donald Trump called him a dictator and Elon Musk accused Kyiv of being a massive graft machine. Meanwhile, 12 civilians have been killed in Russian strikes over the past day as home and infrastructures are hit. Reports also say the US is blocking a G7 statement calling Russia the aggressor on the 3rd anniversary of the invasion. Meanwhile, French President Emmanuel Macron says Trump cannot be weak against Vladimir Putin. It comes ahead of the French leader's visit to Washington next week, where he'll attempt to convince Trump that their interests are the same. The intervention now puts Sir Keir Starmer under pressure to also take a tough line during his own trip to Washington. Well, Safeguarding Minister Jess Phillips says the Prime Minister will have a serious talk with Donald Trump when they meet.
I'm absolutely sure that the Prime Minister, who has made it incredibly clear that the security of our nation and our nation in the world is a fundamental core principle and the most important thing for our government, that he will negotiate with Donald Trump with, not with laughter and with jokes, but with the seriousness that it deserves.
That's the news on GB News. I'll be back with you for another look at the top stories in around half an hour. Now, though, it's over to Dawn.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Hello, thank you very much, Sam, by the way, for those marvellous news bulletins for you. Where do you want to start this Friday afternoon, then? What about the Prime Minister? Good a place as any, isn't it? Sir Keir Starmer has taken the fight to reform as he's warned his cabinet that Labour must stop looking down at working-class voters and take their worries about immigration seriously. Slightly worrying that he feels like he has to actually articulate that, but hey, we'll go with it for now. GB News political editor Christopher Hope joins me now with the latest on this breaking story.
Exciting, Dawn.
Are they talking the talk and walking the walk, or is it just talk?
It shows to me that the team around Keir Starmer and himself are listening, I think, to the concerns of GB News viewers and listeners. The 1,500-word letter to the members of the Labour cabinet from Sir Keir Starmer sent in the past 7 days. In there, he says in terms that we must recognise that all immigration is not an untrammelled good. He says that pure economic migration was confused with genuine concern for those fleeing persecution in the past, and we end up treating all immigration as an untrammelled good. Somehow politics end up being too scared to say what's obvious, that some people are genuine refugees and some aren't. The people coming to work here can be a positive, but it can also, we need to control the borders. It's almost an obvious thing to say for GB News viewers and listeners, but I just think that maybe some people in Labour need to hear this too.
I think it's astonishing that any politician in this country needs to hear that, you know, the working class's opinions are to be taken seriously, but that we are entitled to them, and I'm including myself in that one as well. But, so this was a letter that was sent out to every Labour Party member?
No, the Cabinet.
The Cabinet. Right, well, it changes quite quickly as well, to be fair.
We've seen a copy at GB News. Okay. It's been sent out to members of the Cabinet. It's him telling his top leadership team, take immigration seriously, don't patronise people who are concerned about it. He says here the establishment has ignored working people on immigration, he says, and that created a schism in our politics. He says we need to stop looking down on people who are worried about immigration. What started with good faith paternalism, he says, has too readily become looking down at people. Yeah. He talks about, interestingly, meeting a lady in Oldham who he met personally. This lady was worried about antisocial behaviour on the street by groups of young men from Europe. But before this woman could raise those concerns about scuffling the streets or fighting or language or whatever it might be that you might think you can raise with the Prime Minister, she had to go to an old box of photos of a wedding that she'd been to of her Asian neighbours and show them to the Prime Minister to show the PM
bless her. She
wasn't racist. And she said, and he says correctly, I think, if you taking it on face value, he says that is devastating. That someone to raise a concern about, you know, thugs from Europe fighting on the street, doesn't say Eastern Europe, on Europe fighting on the streets. She can't even raise that issue until she convinces the PM that she is a good person.
But the thing is with this, Chris, don't you think that the reason that lady felt like that in the first place was because a lot of the people in Keir Starmer's cabinet
What, look down on people like that? Well, I wonder.
You can't say anything about immigration because you are racist. That's coming from a lot of the people in that cabinet.
We get that a lot at GB News. We talk about immigration, illegal and legal migration as a big issue. We know it's a big issue from our post bag. And then critics say it's a racist thing to talk about, and it just isn't. And understanding that, I think Sir Keir Starmer is going towards understanding that. He also talks about the rivals to Labour. He says, and in this sense, he's having a go at Reform UK and to a lesser extent the Tory party. To taking on immigration, first of all, that is certainly an attack on Reform, who go on about it a lot. And he's saying we can also own this too in Labour. He also says that this new era, he used the word new defined by those who want to charge people to use the NHS. That has been mooted in the past, or by reform, I think, a flat taxation system. That's been mooted maybe by Kemi Bade, not that hand tax cuts to millionaires, or cuddling up to Putin. That's a claim made by critics of Farage, of the way he backed Trump on the issue of, to an extent, on Ukraine, or cutting back on rights of parents and women. That's, of course, aimed at Kemi Bade. He's saying, if we don't take on these issues, our rivals benefit. I mean, and just finally, he does say at the very end, he wants to stand up for ordinary people who feel shut out and ignored by elites. So he's taking on the establishment on behalf of the working people.
Brilliant. Maybe inspired by GBNews. Hopefully,
I don't know. Is he listening? Is he watching? He might be.
Yeah. Hi, Keir. But, I mean, how has this gone down with the Cabinet? I mean, you know, the likes of Yvette Cooper infamously, you know, stand there, refugees welcome and migrants welcome, whatever it was, but everyone was welcome,
We don't know yet. We haven't got reaction from the Cabinet. They probably wouldn't comment on a leaked letter.
No, of course they're not, but I'm wondering if they're thinking it's,
I think the fact it needs to be said says something. The fact that people need to be told that, you know, we need to recognise that concerns about migration don't look down on people who have those concerns. They aren't racist. They're just people worried about it. It's what we say over and over again at GB News.
Well, of course, because it's right. That's why.
Yep.
You are allowed to be concerned about immigration without some middle-class
questioning motives. That's
idiot accusing you of being a racist. There you go, I said it.
Just questioning motives all the time on people who don't really deserve it.
No, exactly. Is there anything else happening in the world of politics?
There are two other things happening this afternoon. Andrew Gwynn, now he's the former health minister, suspended by the Labour Party and sacked as a minister. He, of course, the MP for Denton and Reddish since 2005. He had some WhatsApp groups leaked he was in charge of. In one of them, he mocked somebody who wasn't a Labour voter for saying, "Will you sort the bins out?" And he suggested that the council should say they could F your bins.
Oh, Chris, I'm going to have to leave you on that bombshell.
I won't say what it is.
Yeah, well, because we're going to have to across now to Maryland in the US, where a National Security Advisor, Mike Waltz, is addressing the Conservative Political Action Conference. Let's have a listen.
Number two. And you know what? We have an obligation to you all, the American taxpayer, to recoup the hundreds of billions of dollars that have been invested in this war. Because you know what? You know what Europe's contributions are? Europe's contributions are in the form of loans. And they're often paid back on the interest, by the interest on Russian assets that have been frozen. So Europe gets paid back, but the American people don't? I don't think so, right? And so that's the deal that we're putting in place that's good for everyone. And yes, you have to talk to the Russian side to understand how we're going to get both sides to the table. And that's what we're doing. Look, this is the common sense presidency. This is the presidency of peace. He's going to end the war in Europe. He is going to end the wars in the Middle East. He is going to reinvest the United States and our leadership in our own hemisphere, from the Arctic to the border to Panama, all the way down to our good friends in Argentina with Milei that you saw yesterday. And you know what? By the end of this all, we're going to have the Nobel Peace Prize sitting next to the name of Donald J. Trump. And who opposes peace? Like, I mean, how do the Democrats oppose peace?
You bring up a great question, which is who opposes peace? Yet you've seen the European leaders under President Macron trying to bring the Europeans together in dealing with the Russian and Ukraine situation. They have been unable to move the ball forward. How are we going to bring our European leaders on board?
Well, President, you know, and all, the other narrative you have in the media is, well, we're not consulting with our allies in Europe. President Trump has talked to Macron twice last week. He's coming here Monday. The Prime Minister of Britain is coming here next Thursday. We are engaging all of our European allies, absolutely. The NATO Secretary General and I just spoke. You establish peace through strength. And we have been demanding that the Europeans step up and contribute to their own defense. And as of now, a third of our NATO allies still are not contributing the minimum, which is 2% of their GDP that they committed to a year ago, or I'm sorry, 10 years ago. So that's unacceptable. And if, you know what, the Europeans want to take a bigger role in their own security, that falls in line with America First principles as far as I'm concerned, as far as President Trump's concerned. So, you know what, he's kind of rattled their cage a bit. And now they're saying, you know what, suddenly they've found more. And they're coming to the table with more. Fine by us. We've only been asking for over a decade now.
Shifting gears here to Iran. We've got Ambassador Mark Wallace with us, basically one of the biggest fighters in terms of ensuring that we can see change in Iran and leading the efforts incredibly here in the United States and across the globe. But I've got to ask you right now, what is this maximum pressure campaign going to look like in terms of Iran? How are we going to stop Iran from exporting terrorism into Israel and killing innocent lives?
Well, first, thank God that Prime Minister Netanyahu, that Bibi did not listen to the Biden team and did not listen to Kamala Harris. And as a result of his leadership and Israel's leadership, Hezbollah in Iran is now decimated. I mean, the pager, beeper, and walkie-talkie operation is going to go down in history. And as a Green Beret, I appreciate a good covert operation. That was one of the greatest ones in history. So you have Hezbollah largely decapitated. You have a real opening in Lebanon that you haven't had in a generation. You have Assad gone in Syria. You have the axis of terror from Iran all the way to threaten our partners, Israel, essentially disrupted, and we need to keep our foot on their neck in that regard. And then from a maximum pressure campaign, the president just signed that executive order returning to maximum pressure to start keeping a foot on the neck of the Iranian economy. And look, just a few years ago, we were seeing that all of Iran's proxies were out of cash, that the Houthis, Hezbollah, Hamas, the militias in Iraq, none of them had the funds and the cash to continue their terror. We're going to get back to those policies that work, but key to it all is that Iran can never have a nuclear weapon. And why does that matter to everyday Americans? Look, if Iran has a nuke, there is a real question of whether they're a rational actor. And they can take out our ally Israel, they can launch against the world, they will have that nuclear umbrella to launch these, all of these other attacks. They cannot have a nuclear weapon, and under President Trump's leadership, we will ensure that does not happen.
Israel. We just got word from the Israeli Defense Forces that they have returned several bodies. This is the Bibas family, the two beautiful children, the redhead children, and what was supposed to be the body of Shara, the mother. Apparently, that doesn't seem to be the case. IDF is saying this is a serious violation of the ceasefire. What's your message, one, to the hostages, their families, from the United States, from President Trump? And two, how can we ensure that we bring all those hostages back home?
My message, President Trump's message to those families is we are with you. His heart breaks and he is horrified by these scenes coming out. And if anyone thinks that Hamas is some type of quasi-benevolent, not so bad, kind of something less than the just despicable terrorists that they are, what more convincing do you need? Hamas is of the worst kinds of terrorist groups out there. They are no different than ISIS. They are no different than Al-Qaeda, and they absolutely must be destroyed. And only under his leadership, remember the Biden administration was trying to do some type of deal. They were obsessed with a ceasefire, but their approach was concession after concession after concession and putting more pressure on Israel than they did on Hamas. Only when President Trump came in and said, look, there will be all hell to pay, the credible threat that only he can deliver, did we see this deal come into place, still under Biden. And we saw our people starting to come out, including 2 Americans, with more to go. So this is only happening because of this election. These are the kind of consequences this election has had. And we will continue to get out everyone that we can. But remember, just 6 months ago, 8 months ago, you had college campuses, you had students, you had faculty, you had protesters celebrating Hamas, talking about from the river to the sea, having the worst kind of anti-Semitism, and now we've seen, and we just saw yesterday, the despicable people that they are and why they can never be allowed to run Gaza and why we can never allow another October 7th again. And there is a lot of talk about two-state. You know who doesn't want a two-state? Who will never allow a two-state? Hamas. And this is why they can never, they just cannot exist going forward.
China is one of our biggest threats. We have seen how China has infiltrated our institutions, has brought fentanyl into the United States, has stolen our intellectual property, have basically made so many deals with many Latin American countries, African countries. They're trying to be strategic in ensuring that the U.S. does not get involved in some of these regions. This has significantly changed under President Trump. Walk us through how we're going to deal with this threat of China.
Well, remember, President Trump is who pivoted us, pivoted the whole national security apparatus back in 2017 and 2018 to deal with the threat and the competition that China is. But he firmly believes we can win this economically, we can win this through our supply chains, we can win this through our markets and fair trade deals, and at the same time rebuilding our great military under, how about our Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, right? Getting them focused on being the most lethal and most badass military in the world and projecting that strength. But at the same time, he appreciates the infiltration that's going on, and we just had Panama say, you know what, we're done with Belt and Road. We're done with allowing China to infiltrate critical strategic assets like the Panama Canal. And again, it's only been a month, folks. We've still got it. We told the president, you said, you know, you have a full 4 years. We don't have to get it all done in 4 weeks. And just final thing, because you mentioned fentanyl. We are going to unleash holy hell on the cartels. Enough is enough. We are securing our border, and the cartels are on notice. You've seen images of the Mexican army doing joint patrols with our border, with our Customs and Border Police and with our military to secure the United States border, because without a border, you don't have a country and you don't have sovereignty. And if there's not anything more than America first than that. And so a lot of, going back to things that worked in the first term, but you know what we have now in the second term? We have a team that is 200% on board with the vision of President Trump. And we've got a great Secretary of State, a great Secretary of Defense, Secretary of Treasury. We've got the Team Florida with Susie Wiles and our Chief of Staff. Like, we are hitting on all cylinders, and we don't have a president that's year 1 or even year 5. He's year 9. And we are building the rocket as we're launching it, and it's just been the honor of my lifetime to be a part of it.
So I was going to ask you who can bench press more, Secretary Hegseth or Mike Waltz, but I'm going to skip that question. We're just going to go a little personal here.
Yeah.
You wake up every morning. You have one of the most important jobs in the administration.
I'm working for a man who doesn't sleep, but
That's
yes,
true,
I
So that means you're
bit.
not sleeping either.
Yeah.
What drives you? What inspires you to do what you do every day?
You know what? It really is. It's been about 20 hours a day. And he's going 21 or 22. I don't know how he does it. I thought I was in 4th gear as a member of Congress and a colonel and a Green Beret. I've now found 3 more, and he stays in 10th. But here's what drives me. These guys. I don't know if you can see this bracelet. This is one of my Green Berets that I lost in combat. And every morning I get up, I look in the mirror, we get ready to go, and I tell myself to be worthy. Be worthy of their sacrifice. Be worthy of those Gold Star families. Be a citizen that is worthy of this blessing that we all wake up with, breathing free air in the greatest country on earth. But we got a glimpse the last 4 years of what the world and what the country would look like under progressive lack of leadership. The world got a glimpse of what the world coming unglued, starting with the disgraceful withdrawal from Afghanistan and how that was done through the wars in Europe. We went from the Abraham Accords to the Middle East on fire, and out of control border. I think, you know, and the president is thinking about this a lot as well. Of course, he wanted that second term. But you know what? Maybe God had a different plan, that the world had to see and feel what it would look like in the country without him. And now you're seeing this amazing embrace of his leadership in the world. But be worthy, everyone. Be worthy of those that are out there right now willing to die for all of us, and those that did give the greatest sacrifice for all of us. And thank God we have a leader back in the White House that not only appreciates that, loves them, and loves all of you, and is willing to run through brick walls to get big things done for this country and for peace and security around the world.
Well, be worthy. I'm taking that with me. Be worthy to do this incredible work. I just want to thank you, and I know on behalf of all of us here at CPAC, we thank you for your service. We thank you for your sacrifice. We thank you for supporting and giving advice to this great president and in serving in this administration. Ladies and gentlemen, our National Security Advisor, Mike Waltz, thank you so much.
Thank you, CPAC. Thank you.
The 47th President of the United States of America.
And, you know, I wouldn't say Fox has been exactly perfect. Fox has been a big difference of Fox between now and what it was 4 years ago, as you know. But we have others that come along, and they're doing well, and Newsmax has been really good, and, you know, others are coming along, and people are seeing that.
OK, you've just been listening to Mike Waltz addressing the Conservative Political Action Conference in Maryland in America. There's some very strong words. Now, moving on, Health Secretary Wes Streeting says it is extremely concerning that doctors who change gender are able to have past wrongdoings scrubbed from public record. That includes previous suspensions and formal warnings. Joining me now to discuss this is a diversity and inclusion facilitator, Katie John Wen. Katie, thank you very much for joining me today. Always a joy to talk to you. Katie, I find this story very, very alarming. You know, doctors who change gender can just scrub their previous records and start afresh. What do you make of this?
Well, it's that they're not scrubbed completely. It's the public-facing version of them. Internally, they have to, by law, still remain linked. In the same way, when a trans person does transition, your national insurance and your DWP records are still accessible internally by staff, but they are obliged by Data Protection, Equality, Gender Recognition Act, etc., to kind of do this muddle of then how do we convey that to the public. So, but there is a duty of care under our existing laws. And so it's not so much that it's a willful act of obfuscation. It's the fact that we have legal obligations based on the varieties of laws that we've created, as I say, that do conflict with each other in different ways. And, you know, I 100% agree, you shouldn't be able to go around hiding your misdemeanors. And so they've got to come to a solution for that, you know, that works within existing law and provides access to that so that people do feel safe. It's got nothing to do with whether the doctor is trans. If they've got a criminal record, whatever it is, if they have past misdemeanors, there should be a way of ascertaining that.
But Katie, this is the only category that it applies to. As far as we're aware, there are 62 cases where our doctors who have changed their gender are issued new registration details that do scrub their public disciplinary history. This only applies to people that have changed gender, and this has obviously all been brought up because of the story going at the ongoing tribunal up in Scotland at the moment. And it doesn't make sense to me that certainly many women who maybe not wanted to be treated by a male doctor are now not able to find out who their doctor is and whether they've had any warnings or any issues in the past.
Well, as I say, these things should be found outable, but one has got to do it in a way that isn't kind of, and this is again the issue that we already have with the conflict between gender, or not the conflict, but the combination of gender recognition, data protection, and equality Act. They've got to do it in a way that isn't like kind of outing the doctor throughout the process. But I think if you have a disciplinary record, if you have a crime on your account, the same thing does actually happen, but in a different context. For example, that if you have a criminal record and you transition and then you come out, then the direct appearance of that record isn't easily ascertainable. In the same way, we have this awful thing that relates to like people who have a sexual and violent criminal history and present case and end up in court, and because of being at some stage in a transition journey for genuine or malicious purposes, then you have this issue of having to refer to them as female, and yet they have committed a sexual act with a male bodily part, which is ludicrous in my mind. I'm trans, absolutely. I agree with respecting people, but I also agree with calling a spade where it exists and where it has happened.
But Katie, every time we talk to you, and I do love talking to you because you actually see things very sensibly rather than it becoming, overheated. I mean, we always end up pitting what people would say is the rights of people who want to transgender with the rights of women. I mean, many women are upset by this story who have a religious faith and they don't want to be treated by a man.
Well, this
they have a right to know, surely.
Well, the right to know versus the right to treatment may be the way of where the discussion should go. There's around about nearly 400,000 doctors, almost exactly half and half, male and female. So in most aspects of care, both genders should exist, both sexes should exist for those categories of care. Obviously, if you're in A&E most of the time and you're actually under anaesthetic, you really don't care. You just want your life to be safe.
No, of course. I mean, yeah.
But if you're in kind of conscious, personal, kind of intimate treatment, I think you have a right to ask. Whether that's the same thing as a right to know is another matter. I think you have a right to ask. If the person you ask is the matron on the ward and say, I request a female doctor, if that request has been made, then I think absolutely they should actually ensure that you are treated by a doctor born female at birth, so that there are no concerns there and no surprises, shocks of discovery, etc. The majority of trans people probably don't pass, so you're going to have suspicions in that sense of the word as well. I think there absolutely, yes, there is a right to ask and a right to be treated, whether for religious or past abuse or just even that right to how you want to think and who you want to be treated by, and we should have a right to express it. As I say, it's about 62 doctors out of 400,000. It's 1 in 6,000.
Yeah.
But there should ordinarily be available someone of a preferred. It's when you're being searched, when you're searched and going through an airport or in police, you have a right to ask to be searched by a person of your own sex. That is the specific request. It isn't about gender. So I think you should be able to ask.
Katie, we've run out of time. Thank you very much. That's Katie John Wentner, Diversity and Inclusion Facilitator. Thank you very much, Katie, for joining us on that. What do you think of that one? gbnews.com/. Do you want to know? I mean, should you be told? I mean, do you feel like you're being covered up here? There's lots more to come between now and 4 o'clock, including are women treated appallingly in the army? That's what one former Defence Minister thinks. She joins me next. Don't go too far. We'll see you soon.
Very good afternoon to you. It's just after 3:30. The top story from the newsroom this hour. Israel has accused Hamas of violating the ceasefire after forensic tests showed a body returned from Gaza was not that of hostage Shiri Bibas. Her 2 young sons were identified among the remains, along with an 84-year-old. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says Hamas put the body of a Gazan woman in a coffin and vowed to make the terror group pay the full price. Israel is now demanding the return of Shiri Bibas, whether she is alive or dead. The BBC has pulled a Gaza documentary from the iPlayer after discovering its 13-year-old narrator is the son of a Hamas official. The broadcaster says it wasn't informed of the family connection before airing the programme titled Gaza: How to Survive a War Zone. And they say they're now conducting further due diligence. It comes after the Culture Secretary, Lisa Nandy, and high-profile media figures had urged the BBC to investigate how the film was made. The programme was removed today, with the BBC saying it won't return while the review takes place. In politics, Labour MP Andrew Gwynn, who was sacked over what were described as vile WhatsApp messages, is now under investigation by Parliament's standards watchdog. He was dismissed as a health minister earlier this month after sending sexist, anti-Semitic and ageist messages in a group with other Labour MPs. The Parliamentary Commissioner for Standards is now probing whether his actions caused significant damage to the reputation of MPs and the House of Commons as a whole. Staying with news from Westminster, Sir Keir Starmer has told ministers to admit that Labour ignored working people's concerns about immigration for too long. In a letter this afternoon seen by GB News, the Prime Minister says politics has become too scared to acknowledge that some migrants are genuine refugees and others aren't. He also warns that Labour must stop patronising voters and prove Reform UK's policies are not the answer. Citing one woman from Oldham, he also said people feel they must justify their concerns to avoid being labelled racist. And he went on to pledge to stand up for ordinary people who feel shut out and ignored by elites. And let's just bring you a piece of breaking news from the world of tech this afternoon, that Apple is taking the unprecedented step of removing its strongest data security feature from UK customers. That's after the government here demanded access to user data. The change will mean that iCloud storage will no longer be encrypted, making personal files accessible to Apple and law enforcement if a warrant is issued. Apple, though, has said it is gravely disappointed and warns creating a backdoor for governments could be exploited by so-called bad actors. Privacy campaigners also call it an unprecedented attack, while US politicians are warning it could threaten intelligence sharing with the UK. Well, that feature of the removal of those strong security features is already being rolled out to new users, and existing users will have that feature removed soon. That's the news on GB News. Plenty more still to come with Dawn straight after this.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
The latest GB News travel.
In South Yorkshire, the M1 southbound is partly blocked after a collision between junction 36 for Barnsley South and 35A for Stocksbridge. In Hertfordshire, the M25 is blocked clockwise after a collision just before junction 22 for St Albans. Delays there of close to 2 hours now. Also, the M1 in Hertfordshire is blocked southbound towards London. That's for a police investigation between Watford at junction 5 and junction 4 for Edgware. And in Surrey, in Godstone, the High Street, the A25, that's still shut in both directions after a sinkhole appeared in the road earlier this week. So the High Street in Godstone closed at the Godstone Hill turn off the B2235.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Lee Anderson's Real World, Fridays from 7 p.m.
That's football.
Well,
you know, it's the hope that kills you.
It does. It gives you highs, it gives you lows. I mean, if you're an Everton fan at the moment, you probably had far too many lows. But as you know, I'm a Nottingham Forest fan.
Well, you must be having a huge high.
But, you know, you had one of the greatest footballers ever to grace the game, Mike, and that was Dixie Dean.
Yeah, absolutely. William Ralph Dean. Didn't like being called Dixie, but that was his nickname. And he was born in 1907. He was my grandfather's best mate. I'm an Everton shareholder. I've been, you know, attached to the club all my life, and so was my father, so was my grandfather, our greatest ever player.
So back in the day when players like Dixie Dean were playing football for big crowds in, you know, a proper...
72,000.
Yeah, a proper working class sport back in the day, weren't it, football? Not like it is today. You've got to be pretty wealthy to afford a ticket.
Even in the 70s, right, and I've seen some, you know, I do like looking back on the football that I watched as a kid. Even in the 70s now, I've seen pictures of the turnstiles, as we used to call them, with a sign at the top, 5 shillings for the Eastern Terrace. 5 shillings. Yeah. Last time I turned down a ticket to go to a football match was Arsenal, who wanted me to pay £830 for a seat in an executive lounge. And though I could have afforded it, because I've worked all my life like you, I just thought at that point, that's ridiculous.
Well,
you know?
you should have told him you were Keir Starmer's security man. You'd have probably got him for nothing.
Well, that's a good idea. Yeah.
But you go back to the the 1930s and 1940s, even the 1960s and 70s. You know, the footballers would walk to the ground and play a game, and then walk back and go for a few beers in the pub.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Hello, welcome back. I'm Dawn Neeson and this is GB News. Thank you for your company this afternoon. Now, a harrowing story, but one we need to talk about. The British Army's failure to properly deal with a soldier's sexual assault complaint played more than a minimal role in her death, a coroner has said. The mother of Royal Artillery gunner Jaisley Beck is now urging for men who hounded her to her death to be prosecuted. Let's bring in former Defence Minister Sarah Atherton, who says this case has exposed the appalling treatment of women in the armed forces. Sarah, thank you very much for joining me this afternoon. Good to have your company. Unfortunately, it's talking about a horrible story, front page of the Express today. It's going to hold up there. It's, you know, this beautiful young lady who should still be with us, and she isn't. And her mum speaking very strongly, no apology will ever bring my daughter back. Women, you've held inquiries into this. Why are women still being treated so badly in the armed forces?
Well, that's $1 million question, isn't it? One that the MOD needs to answer. Sadly, this is not an uncommon case, and we often see such cases in the media. Back in 2021, I chaired an inquiry as part of the Defence Select Committee into the experiences of women in the military. It was one of the largest inquiries undertaken in Parliament, and we received 4,000 pieces of evidence. And the results were truly shocking and challenged the MOD. We uncovered evidence of widespread bullying, harassment, intimidation, sexual assault, complete mistrust of the complaint system, poor and immoral leadership, and the lack of provision of equipment and kit for women, and health policies. We made 30 recommendations, and the MOD did take most of those investigations and put initiatives in place, from female health policies, clothing and equipment fit for the female form, because before then they were wearing men's equipment. That actually included tactical vests. They implemented wraparound childcare and introduced a zero tolerance policy to inappropriate sexual behaviour, which is all very positive and progressive, and certainly gone some way. Now, up until 2021, if you had a complaint in the military, you had to go through your chain of command. And the evidence we received clearly stated this was failing servicewomen and men, because often it was the chain of command that they were the perpetrator of the abuse in the first place. So what the MOD did from 2021 was introduce 3 new structures. The Central Admissibility Team, so now service personnel did not have to go through their chain of command if their complaint involved a sexual element. A Defence Serious Crimes Unit, which dealt with the higher end sexual cases, which was rape and initiation ceremonies, and a very much needed victim and witness support unit to support victims going through that process. Now, I'm hearing all those 3 are exceptionally good organisations, but they are overwhelmed, oversubscribed, and require more resources. And as we can see in the case of gunner Jaisley Beck, she didn't seem to go through any of these systems. She went through the chain of command. So whilst things have improved in the military, the uncomfortable issues of sexual abuse have not gone away.
So what do we need to do? I mean, obviously, you know, the MOD and defence spending, we have been talking about it on a daily basis because of the situation in Ukraine. So how can we protect women when we know that financially there isn't a lot of money to ensure that women are protected more going forward from here?
Well, it was interesting that the coroner reported that the military had failed Gunnar Beck. They failed in their duty of care and they failed to follow through their own procedures. That's not going to cost money. That's culture. The military keep providing people like me and the media with evidence of their incapability to administer justice and to uphold service personnel's rights and welfare. Now, they're not unionised, and I never want the military to be unionised, because we can't have personnel saying, I'm not going to soldier on Sunday because I want time and a half. But the military is hemorrhaging personnel. And this is one of the reasons why, and our servicemen and women deserve a lot better. But the key issue for me is the culture, this toxic culture. Why? And we have to say this is a minority, but why do so many, or albeit a minority, of servicemen abuse their position when they're in positions of leadership and power and position and status? And the answer is because they can. It is a system, the chain of command within the investigation system is a system that can be manipulated and abused to protect the perpetrator and to protect the maladministration of the complaint. So for me, the first thing they should do is remove the chain of command from any complaint with any sexual element in it. There are calls to introduce an independent complaint system, but as I very well know, the MOD are quite shy of independent scrutiny. But to be fair on commanding officers, they're not HR specialists, they're not sexual health specialists, they're not social workers, they're soldiers, sailors, airmen and women. And I'm sure they'd be quite happy to relinquish their role in investigating such complaints.
Sarah, we have to go, unfortunately. We have run out of time on that one, but it's hopefully... people will take notice and we will see improvements in how young women are treated. Thank you very much. That's former Defence Minister Sarah Atherton. Thank you very much. OK, it's a tough listen, but one of those stories we have to talk about now, moving on, is Sir Jim Ratcliffe's Manchester United, a blueprint for Britain's Doge. All that coming up. I'm Dawn Neeson. This is GB News, Britain's news channel. We'll see you very soon.
Hello again. It's time for your GB News weather update from the Met Office. There will be some dry and perhaps bright weather at times this weekend, but also some heavy rain and strong winds, especially on Sunday. Currently, there's a double frontal system across the UK. That is starting to break up and ease, and so most of today's rain is also easing away. However, in the southeast, whilst it's been largely dry through today, we are going to see some heavy and persistent rain pushing in as we go through this evening and overnight, lingering into tomorrow. Elsewhere, a drier picture, though some showers towards the northwest. There will also be some clear skies, but quite cloudy for many, particularly across England and Wales. And whilst the winds have eased a bit, it is going to be quite blustery, so temperatures not dropping a huge amount for most. So a relatively mild start to the day tomorrow, and across parts of Scotland, especially towards the northwest, still quite blustery here with some fairly frequent showers, some of these a bit on the heavy side. A bit drier further east, though a few showers are possible. Across parts of Northern Ireland, particularly in the west, a few showers quite likely here first thing on Saturday. Otherwise, and across much of England and Wales, a mostly dry picture, quite a bit of cloud, but in the southeast, here we have that rain lingering. And this rain is going to be a bit heavy at times, quite persistent, particularly across parts of East Anglia and Kent, and it's going to linger here through into the afternoon before eventually clearing away. Elsewhere, and actually tomorrow looks like the driest, brightest day of the weekend, but there will be a few showers around. Some of these could be a little bit on the heavy side, especially towards the southwest. Temperatures still a touch above average for the time of year, so feeling relatively mild. As we go through into the evening, and any rain in the southeast will have cleared away, there will still be a few showers around, but most of these will die out. So a largely dry night ahead, but that dry weather doesn't last particularly long. Sunday is looking very unsettled indeed. We are going to see some heavy rain and strong winds pushing in across most places. I'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Hello, welcome back. I'm Dawn Neeson and this is GB News. Thank you for your company this Friday afternoon. Now, should we talk football? It is a weekend coming up. We've made it to Friday. We deserve it. Man United's belt tightening under Sir Jim Ratcliffe is making waves from, get this, counting screws to returning rolls of sellotape. No expense is spared. To be fair, it's been a difficult first year for the club, from topping the table to slumping to mediocrity somewhere near West Ham. I think they're slightly above us. That's my club, by the way. So let's get the latest with sports journalist Ben Jacobs on what exactly is going on here. Ben, thank you very much for joining me this afternoon. Ben, returning rolls of sellotape and, you know, cutting back on envelopes. And the steward of the week used to get 50 quid. Now they just get a certificate. This is some cutback, isn't it?
Yeah, this is cutthroat cutbacks, if you like, and they do unfortunately include redundancies as well. But this is the Ineos way, to be lean and to be mean and to be cost effective. Now, the irony is Manchester United haven't been cost effective because they kept Erik ten Hag on. They extended his contract. They got rid of him. They brought in Ruben Amorim. Then Dan Ashworth had come in as sporting director. He left as well. And each of these either hires in Amorim's case or departures have had huge compensation. So they may be saving a few million using some of the tactics that you mentioned, but they've spent far more in these dramatic changes in the last sort of 6 months or so. So Manchester United need to find a way, if they're to be compatible with the Premier League's profit and sustainability rules, of making big savings. And they can do that ultimately by getting rid of some high earners like Marcus Rashford, or making sure that they don't change the manager again, because that requires paying someone to leave and paying somebody to come in as well. But the bigger picture here is changing the culture, having a workforce that is leaner and meaner, like I said before, and in doing so, saving some vital funds. So in the next probably 5 years or so, Manchester United can return to glory.
I guess when you've got, when you are cutting costs, you do have to start small. But when you are talking, you know, we all know footballers, you know, the money, it's just like the cars they drive. And then you're talking about the steward of the week actually having his £50 taken away and being given a certificate. I mean, it does sound a bit like they're maybe trying to save money in the wrong areas.
Yeah, and I suppose they would argue that footballers are always going to be well compensated, and if they succeed, nobody really speaks as much about it. But you've got your other brand costs or operational ones that if you can cut down, or if you feel there's waste in the business, over time it will all add up. But when you're talking about screws or sellotape or a certificate, as you say, instead of 50 quid, they seem so minor that there is a danger that you can end up harming morale and it having a negative effect on culture at the football club. So there's a balance. But Jim Ratcliffe is making one point, really, that he's putting in $300 million of his own money, and he wants that to be productive and not just get subsumed in effectively offsetting operational costs. And that's why we're seeing a lot of changes to the back office staff and the way that Manchester United run day on day away from the football side.
But Ben, finally and quickly, is it actually going to work?
Well, they think it's going to work, but it might take 5 years. So there may be some pain before we see some progress. But I think the reality is, if you're saving money, incentivizing staff and putting in strong foundations, that will be better than how the Glazers have approached things. So I think it'll work, but it's going to take time. And time is not just days or seasons, it's years.
Ben, thank you very much for joining us. Have a lovely sporting weekend. Unfortunately, we've run out of time on that one, but don't go too far. We are coming straight back after this with some really interesting stuff about Keir Starmer for you.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Alan Wright. In Manchester, the M56 eastbound is partly blocked after a collision at junction 2 for Sharston. In Northamptonshire, the M1 southbound is partly blocked after a collision between Northampton at junction 15 and junction 14 for Milton Keynes. In Berkshire, delays on the M25 clockwise, that's partly blocked after a collision between junction 15 for the M4 and 16 for the M40 interchange. And in Surrey, in Godstone, the A25, that's the High Street, that's shut in both directions after a sinkhole appeared in the road earlier in the week. So the High Street in Godstone shut at the Godstone Hill turnoff.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Want to be one of 2 lucky Great British Giveaway winners? That's right, you could win one of 2 prize bundles, which includes a brand new iPhone 16, £500 in shopping vouchers to spend in your favourite store, and an incredible £10,000 in tax-free cash to spend however you like. What would you spend that cash on? For another chance to win, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus 1 standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. Call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge, or post your name and number to GB11 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 7th of March. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more. Whether it's breaking royal news, Will, please bring us up to date. Or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, welcome back. Thank you for joining me. I'm Dawn Neeson for Martin Daubney on GB News, broadcasting live from Westminster this afternoon. We have got an absolutely cracking show coming up for you. And remember, this show is all about you and your views, so do keep those notes coming in. Now, starting off with the main story, the PM takes the fight to reform as he tells his cabinet that Labour must stop looking down on working class voters and start taking the worries about immigration seriously. Is this the start of the big Brexit betrayal, though? And in the latest case of Have the Lunatics Taken Over Our Asylum, a Sri Lankan sex offender has been allowed to stay in Britain because, yes, you've guessed it, he's gay. So is it finally time to leave the ECHR? And Labour pulls mental health support cash for farmers amid the inheritance tax raid. I'll be getting the reaction of a farmer whose dad took his own life later in the show. So, and I want to, Labour pulls mental health support, but we've done that, haven't we? Sorry, we're having a few technical issues here. But this show is all about you and your views, so make sure you get in touch. It's very simple to do so by visiting gbnews.com/your say. Keep those messages coming in. It's a Friday afternoon. I want to have a chat with you. But before we start that conversation, let's get the news headlines with Sam Francis.
Very good afternoon to you. It's just after 4 o'clock. We will be straight back with Dawn very shortly. First, though, a look at the other stories making the news. And Israel has accused Hamas of violating the ceasefire after forensic tests showed a body returned from Gaza was not that of hostage Shiri Bibas. Her 2 young sons were identified among the remains, along with an 84-year-old man. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says Hamas put the body of a Gazan woman in a coffin and vowed to make the terror group pay the full price. Israel is now demanding the return of Shiri Bibas, whether she is alive or dead. Well, Hamas says the mix-up may have been caused by an Israeli airstrike. And earlier, journalist Amir Oren gave us his thoughts.
You have 2 possible hypotheses. One is that the chaos in Gaza is such that the minor organization or actually crime family who originally abducted the Bibas family and then had to give them over to Hamas, misplaced the body, or perhaps Hamas later misplaced the body. The other possibility is that Shiri Bibas was abused, molested, or worse.
The BBC has pulled a Gaza documentary from iPlayer after discovering its 13-year-old narrator is the son of a Hamas official. The broadcaster says it wasn't informed of the family connection before airing the programme and is now conducting further due diligence. It comes after Culture Secretary Lisa Nandy and high-profile media figures urged the BBC to investigate how the film was made. The programme was removed today, with the BBC saying it won't return while the review takes place. Sinn Féin are set to boycott White House St Patrick's Day celebrations over Trump's stance on the Israel-Gaza conflict. The party leader, Mary Lou McDonald, says she won't attend an event at the White House because of what she called a principled stance against the expulsion of Palestinian people from Gaza. However, no invites have officially been issued yet. Back to politics here at home, and Labour MP Andrew Gwynn, who was sacked over what were described as vile WhatsApp messages, is now under investigation by Parliament's standards watchdog. He was dismissed as a health minister earlier this month after sending sexist, anti-Semitic and ageist messages in a group chat with other Labour MPs. The Parliamentary Commissioner for Standards is now probing whether his actions caused significant damage to the reputation of MPs or the House of Commons as a whole. And Sir Keir Starmer has told his ministers to admit that Labour ignored working people's concerns about immigration for too long. In a letter seen by GBNews this afternoon, the Prime Minister said politics has become too scared to acknowledge that some migrants are genuine refugees, while some aren't. He also warns that Labour must stop patronising voters and prove Reform UK's policies are not the answer. Well, we have just had a line in from Reform UK's Deputy Leader Richard Tice in response to that news from the letter from Sir Keir Starmer. And I'll just read a quick quote here from Richard Tice. It says, "Quite frankly, it is concerning that the Prime Minister has to tell his own cabinet to stop looking down on working class voters." And continues, if this doesn't show the true colours of Labour, I don't know what does. And he finishes this statement, Richard Tice, Deputy Leader of Reform UK, saying, "We are coming for Labour." Well, let's turn to other news in politics this afternoon. And the Solicitor Regulations Authority is reopening an investigation into Business Secretary Jonathan Reynolds over claims he misrepresented his legal career. Regulators initially reviewed the case and closed it after Reynolds corrected his professional profiles, but they have now received new information and say they'll take another look. Volodymyr Zelensky has told Donald Trump's envoy that Ukraine needs reliable security guarantees before any peace deal with Russia. It comes as the White House cancelled a conference with Zelensky after Trump called him a dictator, and as Elon Musk accused Kyiv of being a massive graft machine. Meanwhile, 12 civilians have been killed in Russian strikes over the past day alone, leaving homes and infrastructure in ruins. Reports also say the US is blocking a G7 statement calling Russia the aggressor on what is the 3rd anniversary of the invasion. Meanwhile, French President Emmanuel Macron says Trump cannot be weak against Vladimir Putin. It comes ahead of the French leader's visit to Washington next week, where he'll attempt to convince Trump that the interests of the United States and Europe are the same. The intervention puts Sir Keir Starmer, though, under pressure to also take a tough line during his own trip to Washington. Well, Safeguarding Minister Jess Phillips says the Prime Minister will have a serious talk with Trump when they meet.
I'm absolutely sure that the Prime Minister, who has made it incredibly clear that the security of our nation and our nation in the world is a fundamental core principle and the most important thing for our government, that he will negotiate with Donald Trump with, not with laughter and with jokes, but with the seriousness that it deserves.
That's the news on GB News. I'll be back with you in around half an hour. Now, though, let's get the latest from Dawn.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you very much, Sam. Now, Sir Keir Starmer has taken the fight to reform as he's warned his cabinet that Labour must stop looking down at working-class voters and take their worries about immigration seriously. GB News political editor Chris Hope joins me with the latest on this story. Chris, this story really annoys me. The fact that he has to write a letter to his cabinet to say, take working-class voters seriously. Huh?
Yeah, well, that's what he's doing. I think it just shows, that the Labour recognise that if you're worried about immigration, it's not a racist thing to do. It's just a concern about where you live and how things are changing there, and have you got a say over that? It's a 1,500-word letter sent to members of his cabinet in the past 7 days by the Prime Minister. We've seen bits of it at GB News. He says in terms that the pure economic migration was confused with a genuine concern for those fleeing persecution. We end up treating all migration, he says, as an untrammelled good. Somehow politicians became too scared to say what's obvious, that some people are genuine refugees and some aren't. The people coming here can be positive and a negative. These are obvious things, we would say. But I think on the left, that hasn't quite been grasped. I think that's quite interesting. He says the establishment hasn't been listening to people, and that's been felt by working people across the country.
I'm sorry, I don't know about you out there, but I'm absolutely gobsmacked that he needs to tell the Cabinet that being worried about immigration doesn't make people racist.
Well, he cites an example.
Living on?
Well, I think, he cites an example of a woman he met in Oldham, who he says was concerned about antisocial behaviour on her street caused by groups of young men from Europe, the PM says. Before she could raise the concerns with him, she took out an old box of photographs, maybe like a shoebox, to show the PM that she was at a wedding for her Asian neighbours, and that gave her the permission to talk about immigration. That is shocking, and in fact the PM gets that, and he says that is devastating.
He's obviously watching GB News. Hi, Keir.
Well,
thanks for watching,
I'm
mate.
sure he is. He should be. I'm sure he is. But in order to speak to a Labour politician, he says it was shocking that for that to happen, she had to explain and show that she wasn't racist. And we know repeatedly from our post box or the email list you've got there online, and from the viewers and listeners to our channel, that it's not racist to be concerned about migration. And the PM is saying that, but I think not all of his cabinet seem to know that, and that's why he feels the need to say it.
That's still slightly worrying, isn't it? What else is happening on Planet Politics?
And the detail of that letter are on our website now, gbnews.com.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so Andrew Gwynn, he's a former health minister. He was part of a WhatsApp group, do you remember that one, called Trigger Matimbers?
Yes, I remember it, yeah.
It was set up it's dated from like 2017-18, when some MPs were being triggered, trigger ballots to justify or be removed as candidates. So it went on for 6 or 7 years. All that cache of messages was leaked to a new Sunday newspaper, the Mail on Sunday. In one of those messages, Andrew Gwynn, the former health minister, MP for Denton and Reddish since 2005, he said that a suggestion to a councillor had to respond to a couple
That's right, another elderly voter,
I don't care about your effing bins, he said. He's apologised for that, but now he's facing an investigation by the Standards Committee, which could lead to... it could go to a suspension and maybe him being removed from Parliament. So he's suspended by the party. It's getting worse for him, not better. And just finally, Jonathan Reynolds, he's the business secretary. He's in trouble for being found to have called himself a solicitor sometimes
Yes.
when he's a trainee solicitor.
Yes.
Now, this kind of thing matters in the world of professionals. If you're a trainee, you're a solicitor, you are one. You can't say you are one. The Solicitors Regulation Authority had looked at this and contacted him a month or so ago. They've now become aware of further information, so we'll look at this, i.e. he's being reinvestigated, which isn't very good for him.
Isn't there a story about Angela Rayner having problems with her CV about how long she worked in one place?
Rachel Reeves.
Rachel Reeves.
The
No, Rachel, there was, I'm sure there was a story about Angela Rayner as well.
No, not Rayner.
No, Angela Rayner, about how long she worked in a care home. She claimed
Oh, well, look at that.
Yeah. I'm sure that was another one.
Someone told me, but more recently, Rachel Reeves.
Rachel Rayner, yeah, we all know about Rachel.
Reset
yeah,
her.
no, Rachel from accounts, we know about her, but no, it's Angela from the care home.
But yeah, I think it's
confused about how long she was working.
Jonathan Reynolds, I think, is in slight hot water here, because I think if you're the business secretary, you're dealing with company bosses who deal with CVs and employment histories all the time, and they know if someone's a bit off with their CV, you raise question marks about them. Well, hang on, what else are you not telling us being clear about? I mean, he blames on his LinkedIn post, he blames his staff for doing it. Well, why not own up to a mistake in your name rather than blaming your staff, I think, but that's old-fashioned possibly. I mean, and also he made that point in Parliament, he said, as a solicitor back in 2014 when he wasn't one before he became an MP. So,
when was the last time you wrote a CV out, Chris?
Wrote one out?
Yeah.
Not for years.
Well, exactly. I can't even remember.
I know.
And I'm sure I was very honest. Were you?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
No, I really
absolutely.
was. No, I really was, Dawn. I think you have to be. And then life's clear. Once you know you're not...
There was nothing on there that was not exaggerated. I believe you. I actually do believe you.
Thank you. It's true.
Thanks very much, Chris. Always a pleasure. Now, joining me now for more reaction to that leaked letter, which is really annoying. I'm annoyed by this one, is former Labour candidate Izzy Waite. Izzy, good to see you. There you are, Izzy. Izzy, this leaked letter, Starmer written to the Cabinet saying voters are not racist if they're worried about immigration. What do you make of this?
Well, I think it's really reassuring to see a Labour leader and, of course, the Prime Minister actually take immigration seriously. And, of course, I mean, I completely agree with you. It's an obvious thing to say. But I think as a Labour member, I mean, I'm speaking from a point of view where I remember a previous Labour leader who, if you did express any kind of concerns around immigration, you would be at risk of being called a racist. So, of course, it's, you know, as I said already, it's an obvious thing to say. In the Labour Party, given our context, I think it's still an important thing to keep reiterating.
Do you think Keir Starmer and the Labour cabinet in particular are in touch with the working class, what working class voters think? Do you think they even know what working class actually is?
Well, I think so. And a lot of the Labour cabinet members do have very varied backgrounds. A lot of them would call themselves working class. And I think we do have a very diverse cabinet. And this is like one of the least privately educated cabinets. So I think that's really positive. So yes, I would say this is a cabinet in touch with the working class.
OK. So why do you think he needs to write this letter then?
Well, I think rightly so. Obviously, immigration is a topic that people are talking about. And I think this is, it's also important that this government is very vocal about the good work that they have done to tackle immigration. I mean, if you speak to anyone, I've been door knocking across the country, and it is something that is raised time and time again. People can see that there is a problem. And I think people are fed up of just being given sticking plaster politics. And we are very used to gimmick politics where we're told, I think the Rwanda flight was the best example of this. We were told that things were going to get better, and they just didn't. And this government is actually getting on with the job. And we have seen the highest level of illegal migrants removed since 2018. We've also seen foreign criminals being removed. I think it's 2,580 foreign criminals have been removed. That's a 23% increase on the same period 12 months before. And, I think also what's really, really important is that we've seen the asylum backlog being cut. So that's a huge thing, which the Tories were responsible for. They were responsible for a massive backlog of cases that were just sitting on desks. And ultimately, what I always say to people to really kind of demonstrate how bad the problem was, that even when we come to clear some of the backlog, some of those cases, some of those people will be unidentified because they've just been in the system for so long. And that's really concerning.
OK, Izzy, it is true that, there have been people deported, but many of those people went voluntarily. We have seen stories today where we are letting people stay in the country because they can't go back to their original country because their kids don't like the chicken nuggets there. So, I mean, it's not really going quite as well as you're portraying it there, is it?
Well, on that, I mean, when you say it out loud, it just sounds ridiculous and it's frankly embarrassing. I think in terms of the chicken nugget case, Chicken Nugget Gate, VetCupid did appeal that decision. So that's, an example of actual action is being taken to prevent it happening in the future. But I think it's ultimately it is systemic of a wider problem that, as I said before, we can all see. The immigration system has been broken, and I would say that is by the Tories. But I just want to be really clear: if we focus on one case like that, and it is important to, of course, raise the absurdity of it. But I am kind of sceptical of some of the Tories who are acting like headless chickens, because I think they're doing it to distract from the fact that they broke our immigration system and we are dealing with the mess that they left behind. There's no human right to chicken nuggets. This was clearly a loophole, and it's a loophole that needs to be closed, but it's a loophole that's being closed.
OK. Izzy, thank you very much. Izzy, your definition of working class, very quickly.
I think working class, it's a working person who ultimately I think identifies as being from a working class community. Yeah.
OK, thank you very much. That's Izzy Waite there, former Labour candidate. OK, now we are giving you some good news for once. I know it's been a tough week, hasn't it? We're giving you 2 chances to win our latest Great British giveaway. Here's all the details you need.
Don't miss your chance to be one of 2 big winners in our latest Great British giveaway, as we have 2 prize bundles that have to be won. First, you'll win a totally tax-free £10,000 in cash to spend however you like. You'll also receive the very latest iPhone 16, and we'll send you on a shopping spree with £500 to spend in your favourite store. For another chance to win, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus 1 standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. Call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge, or post your name and number to GB11 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrants must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 7th of March. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Yeah, good luck indeed with that one. That could give you a rather nice summer, couldn't it? Just want to read one message out coming from Audrey. Good afternoon, Audrey. Audrey says, Prime Minister, you and your cronies are on the ropes. Lots of you agree with this one. Put British citizens first, reinstate pensioners' heating allowance, stop farmers' inheritance tax, and stopped uncontrolled mass migration. Reinstate the ability to control our borders. Lots of you agreeing with that one. What do you make of this leaked letter as well? The fact that Keir Starmer had to write to the Cabinet and say, look, if your voters are a bit concerned about immigration, it's not a problem, by the way. It doesn't make them racist. The fact they had to write about that one? Let me know at gbnews.com/your say, because this is all about you and your views. Now, don't go too far, because coming up, Apple are to remove the highest level of data protection after government demanded. Is this Big Brother Britain? I'm Dawn Neeson, and this is GB News, Britain's news channel. We'll see you very soon.
I'm Stephen Dixon, and thanks for joining us on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it?
Because
the failure is
you're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back,
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
and we do not shy away from the difficult stuff. Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood. So join me on Jubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there short and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK.
We're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hello, welcome back. I'm Dawn Neeson and this is GB News. Thank you very much for your company this afternoon. Now, Sir Keir Starmer has taken the fight to reform as he's warned his cabinet that Labour must stop looking down at working class voters and take their worries about immigration seriously. What do you think of this at home? Lots of you are actually quite cynical. They think it's been deliberately leaked, so, so Starmer sounds a bit more in touch and is concerned about what you're thinking. And after your votes again next time round, what do you reckon, though? gbnews.com/yoursay. So let's join one of our viewers now. This is GB News viewer Nick Simon. Nick, thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. Nick, what do you make about this leak? Are you cynical about it? People are thinking it's deliberately leaked?
Well, to be honest, I wouldn't trust anything Keir Starmer says about immigration. Dawn, thank you for having me on, by the way. The Labour government hasn't got any chance of controlling immigration at all. In 2023, the UK population was 68.35 million. Population of France was 68.29 million. France is 4 times bigger than the UK. So I think anyone that's not concerned about our borders has to be a bit bonkers.
Nick, are you upset that there was even any doubt in the cabinet that anyone being worried about immigration was automatically racist? The fact that they have to write a letter saying it's not racist to be worried about immigration?
Doesn't really surprise me with the current government and the Labour Party, but purely common sense is to be concerned when you're such a small island with such a massive population. You can't ignore, and if you're unable to control your borders and you're unable to deport people, you're not an independent sovereign nation. So it's just common sense, but does the common sense really register with this lot? Point is, they've ruled out leaving the ECHR and they've ruled out scrapping the Human Rights Act. So the current government is never going to be able to control immigration at all. And I don't have got any interest in doing it. It's just sound bites from them.
So are you convinced that you're going to see any improvement in the immigration levels going forward?
Under this government, no, not at all. Reform have obviously said that they would leave the ECHR and scrap the Human Rights Act. They're the two prerequisites for at least getting the ability to deport people who come here illegally. Without those two prerequisites, you're just not going to be able to do anything. Yes, there's a returns agreement with Albania, so some people can be deported, but the problem just gets bigger and bigger, and the current government's got no interest in doing anything about it, so they're just speaking in sound bites. I'm not sure whether that particular story was leaked to try and make people believe that there's a concern, but I certainly don't believe there is for a minute.
OK, that's great. Thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. That's GB News viewer Nick Simon. Thank you very much for joining us. OK, gbnews.com/your say to get in touch and have your say as well on any of the stories we're talking about. Now, let's move on to this breaking story for you. Apple is removing its strongest data security feature for UK users, ceasing encryption for iCloud storage following government demands for user data access. Yeah, me neither. There's a lot of words there at the moment, but is this Big Brother Britain watching us? Now, joining me, thankfully, to explain what's going on here, because I'm not too sure either, is technology journalist Will Geyer. Will, thank you very much for joining me. Will, can you tell me what's going on in English here, please?
Right, so this is fairly unprecedented. Apple have offered a security feature through its iCloud service, which is where you can save stuff on their servers in the cloud rather than on your computer at home, so you can access it from your smartphone, etc. Your documents, your photos, your information from your computer. And until now, that has been encrypted. That means you are the only person with the key to unlock that. So it's not something that is shared with Apple. So Apple, if the police came to them or the law enforcement agencies came to them, could not provide law enforcement agencies with a way of decoding the information that you'd saved to that place. As of right now, the UK is the only place in the world where that no longer applies because for some reason or another, the UK government, and they haven't told us about this, which is why it's even more interesting, and the conspiracy theories will begin, have managed to persuade Apple, rather than give them a back door or a key, if you would, to break that encryption, Apple have said, I'm not having any of that, and have switched it off.
Right, so why is it just in the UK? What's so special about us?
Well, because the UK asked for something Apple were not going to give them, and that was a key. Because, Dawn, if you create a key or a backdoor through this stuff, it isn't just going to be used by all the nice, happy countries like the UK. Other governments could get hold of this, hackers would want to get hold of it, and very soon it will become out of control. So rather than compromise the system they've spent billions of dollars on developing, Apple have said, we're just going to make sure that users in the UK don't have access to the highest levels of security that we've previously offered them. Now, I must give you some context on this, importantly. If you're a online child safety advocate, this is fantastic news because it means that no longer can encrypted images of child sexual abuse or any of that stuff be hidden in these places. However, and I am somebody that believes there should be no place for that online, but it penalises 99.99999% of society that were using it for perfectly legitimate means. So if the government has another more important reason for doing this that we're not yet aware of, I do wish they'd communicate with us and tell us what's going on, because they haven't. We've only been told this by the fact that the service has been switched off on our devices, and Apple has confirmed they've had to switch it off. There's not been an announcement from the government or any further information. So what will happen here is the conspiracies will begin. I've already got journalists messaging me and suggesting this is part of a government massive grab for our data and nothing will be safe and secure. I don't believe that to be the case, but what I do believe is that this hasn't been very successfully communicated to a huge number of people who use the iCloud service.
Will, I'm still sort of like, what exactly is the iCloud, to be honest with you? But is there anything now people who are worried can do? I mean, I'm waving my phone around here. Is there anything I can do to make my phone more secure, my data more secure?
So take it away from an Apple device, seemingly at the moment, and that's definitely not the message I want to give people. So, Don, very quickly, the iCloud is the place where you store information from your iPhone or your tablet, your Apple tablet, into the cloud. So that's when it's stored remotely, so you can access it on any other device. So lots of people use it and pay a monthly subscription for that service at the moment. In terms of what you can do to stay safe, if Apple have followed this rule and have switched off encryption, I'm pretty confident the government must have contacted other tech companies too, but we haven't had any rulings or any updates from them. I just wish we'd get some clarity, perhaps, about why this decision has been taken and why the government has decided to do it, who it's protecting, or what is the reason, what is the concern that iCloud has been the first place they've targeted for this.
I'm still worried. Thank you very much for trying to reassure me, though, Will. Appreciate that. That's Will Gaia, technology journalist, who's in a tech boy cave there, isn't he? OK, thank you very much for that one. Are you worried? I know I am. There's lots more still to come on today's show, including Wes Streeting condemns wiping of trans doctors' records. How's that one going to affect you? But first, let's get those latest news headlines with Sam Francis.
Dawn, thank you, and good afternoon from the GB newsroom. The top story, well, the Reform UK Deputy Leader Richard Tice has slammed Labour, claiming they fail to take immigration seriously and dismiss working-class voters. It comes after a letter seen by GB News has revealed Sir Keir Starmer told his ministers to admit his party did ignore working people's concerns about immigration. The Prime Minister says politicians have also become too scared to acknowledge that some migrants are genuine refugees, but some aren't. He warns Labour must stop patronising voters and counter the rise of Reform UK's policies. And he also pledges to stand up for ordinary people who feel shut out and ignored by elites. Labour MP Andrew Gwynn, who was sacked over what were described as vile WhatsApp messages, is now under investigation by Parliament's standards watchdog. He was dismissed as a health minister earlier this month after sending sexist, anti-Semitic and ageist messages in a group chat with other Labour MPs. The Parliamentary Commissioner for Standards is now probing whether his actions caused significant damage to the reputation of ministers and the House of Commons as a whole. Britain is reportedly planning an Australian-style youth mobility scheme for EU countries as part of Sir Keir Starmer's reset with Brussels. The deal could see tens of thousands of young Europeans live and work in the UK for up to 3 years, with similar opportunities for Britons in Europe. But it's understood there would be a cap on numbers, despite the EU insisting mobility shouldn't be subject to quotas. A woman who claimed to be Madeleine McCann has appeared in court accused of stalking the missing girl's family. Julia Wandel was arrested at Bristol Airport on Wednesday and is charged with 4 counts of stalking involving serious alarm and distress. The 23-year-old is accused of also sending messages, leaving voicemails and turning up at the McCann's home twice. She was remanded into custody after appearing in court and will enter a plea in April. Madeleine McCann vanished in Portugal in 2007 in what is one of the world's most high-profile missing child cases. And Apple is taking the unprecedented step of removing its strongest data security feature from the UK after the government demanded access to user data. The change means iCloud storage will no longer be encrypted, making personal files accessible to Apple and law enforcement if a warrant is issued. Apple, though, says it's gravely disappointed and warns that creating a backdoor for governments could be exploited by so-called bad actors. Privacy campaigners also call it an unprecedented attack, while US politicians warn it could threaten intelligence sharing with the UK. That feature is already being disabled for new users and existing access to be removed soon. Those are the latest headlines for now. I'll be back with you in half an hour. Now, though, let's head straight back to Dawn.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Alan Wright. In West Yorkshire, the A1M northbound is partly blocked after a collision at junction 45 for Boston Spa. In Manchester, the M60 is queuing clockwise after a collision at junction 18 for Simister Island and the M66 turn-off. In Berkshire, delays on the M4 westbound. That's partly blocked after a collision between junction 8 for Maidenhead and junction 10 for Wokingham. In Surrey, anti-clockwise, the M25 is partly blocked after a collision between Chertsey at junction 11 and junction 10 for the A3. And in Somerset, the M5 northbound is queuing for roadworks between junction 23 at Bridgewater North and junction 22 for Burnham-on-Sea.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Good afternoon, Britain. Weekdays from midday.
I'm here in M. Manzi's, which is now the oldest surviving pie and eel shop in London. It's been open since 1892, and as you said in the intro there, it's really sort of a dying breed. One of the sister sites of this shop, the distant relative, owned one of their own other shops in Deptford, and that closed on Saturday for the very last time. They've been open for over 100 years. So you clearly see that there's a declining, not necessarily a declining interest, that's the wrong way of putting it, but it's nowhere near as prevalent as it used to be. This was a staple of the East End, and it's now gone from about 300 shops in the Victorian times to under 40 now, and it's declining further and further. Now, also, a couple of months ago, I was in Basildon talking about a similar story with Richard Holden, trying to create a protected status for pie and mash to prevent sort of copycats from stealing the recipe and making it less authentic. So that is ongoing. There's clearly interest in it, and tourists enjoy coming in here. Hopefully, I'll get one of my own pies shortly and have another taste. But it would be a shame to see this go. It's not just about the pie and the taste and the flavour, which is fantastic. It's also about history and community. A lot of people come in here as regulars, so we're just shining a light on a crucial part of London's historic economy. It's a bit of good fun, and it certainly tastes very good as well. Demographics have changed, yeah, and actually a lot of the ownership, the people who would run these shops traditionally over the last few decades are moving out towards the west, they're moving towards Kent, they're moving towards Sussex, so there are demographic changes, and no doubt that is influencing it as well. And as I say, it's important to do stories like this just to remind people of London's history and why it's important to support these local businesses.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Hello, welcome back. I'm Dawn Neeson, and this is GB News. Thank you very much for your company this afternoon. Now, Health Secretary Wes Streeting says it is extremely concerning that doctors who change gender are able to have past wrongdoings scrubbed from public record. That includes previous suspensions and formal warnings. Joining me now to discuss this is a transgender teacher and journalist, Debbie Hayton. Debbie, thank you very much for joining me this morning. We've spoken many times before on the rights of the trans issue versus the rights of women. Now, this case has come about with the ongoing disciplinary between nurse Sandy Peggy and Dr. Beth Upton, a trans doctor. And we've learned that basically doctors who change gender are issued with new registration details that scrub their public disciplinary history from the record. Now, if this only applies to trans medics, what do you make of this? It just feels completely wrong to me.
Well, you're right. It is completely wrong. This shouldn't be happening. Trans rights was never about getting special rights that other people don't have. It was simply being treated in the same way as everybody else. And if everybody else gets given a registration number when they qualify, and then their record is attached to that number, then surely trans people should have the same rights and they should be treated in the same way as everybody else. That's not happening, and that's wrong.
Were you surprised to learn that this was actually the case? I must admit, it's a surprise to me. And Dr. Upton is one of 62 cases that we know about.
Well, I was surprised that the record of any past disciplinaries has gone. Though there's nothing to suggest that Dr. Beth Upton is in that position. And in some ways, it's unhelpful for people with unblemished records, because if it's thought, well, you're trans, therefore we don't know about your record, that's not helpful to anybody. So I was surprised that happens, and I think that something needs to be put right here quickly.
Wes Streeting has raised concerns himself personally, but what do you think will be done about it, or what should be done about it?
Well, what's going on here is wrong. So the records need to be complete. Now, there is the. If Dr. Upton has taken advantage of the Gender Recognition Act and got a gender recognition certificate, then the GRC does more than change your legal sex. It does shroud that change in secrecy. It's akin to witness protection. But this was not about keeping secrets. This was just about protecting people and making sure that people were not discriminated against. I think we've moved on a lot in 20 years. I don't think this is necessary anymore.
It's all very well protecting people, I understand that, but what about the women that are concerned about this? Many women who, for personal, religious or cultural reasons want to know the sex of the doctor treating them. They have rights to know this, surely.
Well, of course they do, and they should have that. There should be no secrets in this. As a teacher, I find that people just want a teacher. Most people don't care, and I'm sure in the medical profession, in medicine, most people don't care in most situations. But if people genuinely want a doctor of the same sex, then they should be able to have a doctor of the same sex. And a Gender Recognition Act may create a legal fiction, but it doesn't change reality, and it's the reality that we need to respect.
Debbie, how do you feel when you see stories like this? You must go, oh, God, it's another one, because it increases that division between the trans community and women who perceive their rights are being taken away from them.
Well, it does, and it's unhelpful, because what you want to be treated in the same way as everybody else. And if the public get the feeling that trans people have got special rights more than what anybody else has, then that leads to concern, it leads to distrust, and it's unhelpful. So I hear stories like this, and I do groan. I just think, treat us the same way as everybody else, and that involves having a record from registration onwards that isn't changed or obliterated when you transition. Why? It's not necessary, and it's not helpful.
OK, Debbie, thank you very much. That is transgender teacher and journalist Debbie Hayton. Thank you very much for joining me, Debbie, on that one. OK, now, some good news from the Vatican. While Pope Francis is a fragile patient because of his age, doctors are treating him, and he is in reportedly good spirits in hospital. Double pneumonia in your late 80s is not a good thing, is it? But now, if you are in search of some good news for you, and you're thinking of maybe some winter sun, quick getaway, here are the forecasts for some of those top European holiday destinations for you.
Can't wait to get in that sea.
Lovely and warm.
Just like the feeling of having great travel insurance.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations forecast.
Storm Coral will be affecting eastern parts of the Mediterranean, bringing in a cold plume, so below average temperatures. These are set to affect Athens, parts of Santorini, so feeling cold here. But as we move our way further west, milder, yes, but some unsettled weather on the cards. Some rain affecting Nice, Barcelona, also parts of Portugal. But Madeira and Tenerife staying largely dry, and that remains the way into next week. Also the best of the temperatures, and temperatures improving across Santorini.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations forecast.
Hello again. It's time for your GB News weather update from the Met Office. There will be some dry and perhaps bright weather at times this weekend, but also some heavy rain and strong winds, especially on Sunday. Currently, there's a double frontal system across the UK. That is starting to break up and ease, and so most of today's rain is also easing away. However, in the southeast, whilst it's been largely dry through today, we are going to see some heavy and persistent rain pushing in as we go through this evening and overnight, lingering into tomorrow. Elsewhere, a drier picture, though some showers towards the northwest. There will also be some clear skies, but quite cloudy for many, particularly across England and Wales. And whilst the winds have eased a bit, it is going to be quite blustery, so temperatures not dropping a huge amount for most. So a relatively mild start to the day tomorrow, and across parts of Scotland, especially towards the northwest, still quite blustery here with some fairly frequent showers, some of these a bit on the heavy side. A bit drier further east, though a few showers are possible. Across parts of Northern Ireland, particularly in the west, a few showers quite likely here first thing on Saturday. Otherwise, and across much of England and Wales, a mostly dry picture, quite a bit of cloud, but in the southeast, here we have that rain lingering. And this rain is going to be a bit heavy at times, quite persistent, particularly across parts of East Anglia and Kent, and it's going to linger here through into the afternoon before eventually clearing away. Elsewhere, and actually tomorrow looks like the driest, brightest day of the weekend, but there will be a few showers around. Some of these could be a little bit on the heavy side, especially towards the southwest. Temperatures still a touch above average for the time of year, so feeling relatively mild. As we go through into the evening, and any rain in the southeast will have cleared away, there will still be a few showers around, but most of these will die out. So a largely dry night ahead, but that dry weather doesn't last particularly long. Sunday is looking very unsettled indeed. We are going to see some heavy rain and strong winds pushing in across most places. I'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.
This is Britain's newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
Headliners on GB News 11 p.m. every night. It's got 3 top comedians going through the next day's newspapers so you don't have to read them, which is great.
That's a good point. He's lying. Maybe he's not lying.
That's Headliners every night from 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. as well on GB News, Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, and as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Hello, welcome back. I'm Dawn Neeson, and this is GB News. Thank you for your company. Now, OK, if you fancy swapping some of the UK dress, not too bad today down south, at least. But maybe little getaway to Milan? What do you reckon to that one? But without the airport faff, well, you might soon be able to just hop on a train from London to Italy. Plans are in motion to expand Europe's high-speed rail network, giving Eurostar some competition, offering travellers greener and more convenient ways to explore the continent. Let's discuss this with travel correspondent at The Independent, Simon Corder. Simon, thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. Simon, and you are there, aren't you? You are at St Pancras. So tell us more about this story.
OK, well, this is, frankly, the most magnificent railway station in the world, I would say. It connects London with Paris, with Amsterdam, with Brussels, and also happens to have trains going to Sheffield, to Dover, to Brighton and places. So a great station, but a lot of people will say that the potential hasn't been realised, particularly on the Eurostar trains behind me. Bear in mind that Eurostar actually opened originally in Waterloo in 1994, and we were promised all kinds of miracles for the number of passengers they were going to carry. It's never met those. And also the fares are very, very high. I've just had a look at Monday, for instance, minimum fare, £109. That's 3 times what you can get from London to Paris on EasyJet for. So I absolutely agree that, you know, the train is fantastic. It's fast. It doesn't have all the airport faff, but it's too expensive. So what HS1, the company that owns the station here and the fast line down to Kent, called London St Pancras High Speed is the brand name, as well as the owners of the Channel Tunnel, which is company called GetLink, they've said, we want loads more trains. And they've actually come out with where we think they will be able to have links to. That includes Cologne and Frankfurt in Germany, Geneva and Zurich in Switzerland. And yes, there's even speculation that you could be able to get on a train and get off in Milan, which would be miraculous. But I think there are some concerns before we get there. So don't book your ticket immediately if I were you, Dawn.
Okay, and it sounds like it's going to be quite expensive as well.
Well, that's part of the problem. So, yes, the trains at the moment, if you did want to go to Milan, for instance, you could do it. You'd have a couple of changes along the way, but you could do it for about £300. If you wanted to fly, there's 35 flights a day from London to Milan, and you can get there for as little as 30 quid in 2 hours flat. And the big question is, are people going to be persuaded to travel in the more green, sustainable way, enjoying the journey as they go along and being prepared to pay a time penalty? Or will we actually find that it won't catch on? It's too early to tell, but certainly any company, and we've heard that Sir Richard Branson's Virgin Group may be interested in taking part in this. As well as a Spanish consortium called Evolyn. If they did go in, I can absolutely guarantee the first thing they would do is start some competition on the very lucrative route to Paris. Only then would they start thinking maybe a bit of Germany, first of all, maybe a bit of Switzerland, and then in the very long term, you and I could be stepping aboard that train to Milan, Dawn.
Oh, you make it sound very romantic. When are we off, Simon? Simon, the other one, talking of Paris very quickly, the Eiffel Tower in Paris has opened a dizzying new walkway for fearless thrill seekers 200 foot above the ground. This sounds good fun for us.
Oh, it absolutely is. And I salute this wonderful icon for making things more exciting for travellers. I mean, the Eiffel Tower, I think, is really, really good trip anyway. You want to get there on a day when, ideally at this time of year, where it's not going to be full. But the idea that you can actually get some extra thrills built in, this is a marvellous thing. And I frankly can't wait to get over there. And while I'm there, I'll also check out for you the new Notre Dame Cathedral, which has been luring people in their millions to Paris.
That sounds quite...
maybe you and I just hop on the Eurostar to Paris if we can afford the ticket, and we'll take a look there.
I'm definitely there. But with Notre Dame at the moment, don't you have to book an appointment to get in now? You have to book a slot to go. It's not as easy as just wandering up.
Well, yeah. Well, I did actually try the week that it opened, and I was I spent about it was like trying to get tickets for a really difficult gig. For Oasis or something, and I just kept logging on, couldn't get anywhere. So I'm going to go back there. It's actually, you've had the first wave, lots of Parisians actually, and people from elsewhere in France. So I think things are going to ease off. So my recommendation is get there before Easter, and you're not going to have the place to yourself, but it should be quite a lot easier. And then straight up to the Eiffel Tower to do that walkway.
It sounds great fun. Thank you very much. As always, Simon Calder, a joy to talk to you. That's travel correspondent at The Independent, Simon. Thank you very much. Now, lots of you have been getting in touch with your thoughts on the big stories of the day. So if you haven't, it's very simple to do so. gbnews.com/your say. Anita says, now we know who Big Brother is, and we won't have to wait too long for the outcome for even more of our free speech being taken away. Meanwhile, this is about the security story. Josh says, I get people upset with the security removal from Apple, but if you haven't got anything to hide, you're not going to be of interest, are you? I'm not sure about that. I'm still trying to get my head around the iCloud, to be honest with you, Josh. So get your thoughts coming in, gbnews.com/your say. Loads more coming up. But before, if you're like Simon, you're off somewhere exciting, here's the weather you might need.
A chilly start will give way to a lovely, warm afternoon. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello again. It's time for your GB News weather update from the Met Office. There will be some dry and perhaps bright weather at times this weekend, but also some heavy rain and strong winds, especially on Sunday. Currently, there's a double frontal system across the UK. That is starting to break up and ease, and so most of today's rain is also easing away. However, in the southeast, whilst it's been largely dry through today, we are going to see some heavy and persistent rain pushing in as we go through this evening and overnight, lingering into tomorrow. Elsewhere, a drier picture, though some showers towards the northwest. There will also be some clear skies, but quite cloudy for many, particularly across England and Wales. And whilst the winds have eased a bit, it is going to be quite blustery, so temperatures not dropping a huge amount for most. So a relatively mild start to the day tomorrow, and across parts of Scotland, especially towards the northwest, still quite blustery here with some fairly frequent showers, some of these a bit on the heavy side. A bit drier further east, though a few showers are possible. Across parts of Northern Ireland, particularly in the west, a few showers quite likely here first thing on Saturday. Otherwise, and across much of England and Wales, a mostly dry picture, quite a bit of cloud, but in the southeast, here we have that rain lingering. And this rain is going to be a bit heavy at times, quite persistent, particularly across parts of East Anglia and Kent, and it's going to linger here through into the afternoon before eventually clearing away. Elsewhere, and actually tomorrow looks like the driest, brightest day of the weekend, but there will be a few showers around. Some of these could be a little bit on the heavy side, especially towards the southwest. Temperatures still a touch above average for the time of year, so feeling relatively mild. As we go through into the evening, and any rain in the southeast will have cleared away, there will still be a few showers around, but most of these will die out. So a largely dry night ahead, but that dry weather doesn't last particularly long. Sunday is looking very unsettled indeed. We are going to see some heavy rain and strong winds pushing in across most places. I'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.
A nice bright morning will generate a lovely warm day, right through to the evening. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Alan Wright. In Cambridgeshire, the M11 is partly blocked southbound after a collision at junction 10 for Duxford and the A505. In Hertfordshire, delays on the anti-clockwise M25. There's a breakdown there blocking a lane at junction 25 for Enfield and the A10. In Surrey, the M25 anti-clockwise is partly blocked after a collision before junction 10 for the A3, with queues back to junction 12 for the M3. And in Berkshire, delays on the M4 westbound. That's partly blocked after a collision. It's between junction 8 for Maidenhead and the A404M, and junction 10 for Woking and Bracknell and the A329M. So do expect some queues on the approach there as well.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
We're giving you not one, but two chances to win this month, with two prize bundles that include an incredible £10,000 in tax-free cash. But that's not all. You'll also get a brand new iPhone 16 and a £500 shopping voucher to spend at your favourite store. So why not be extra lucky this month? For another chance to win, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. Call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB11 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 7th of March. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it?
No,
Because the failure is
you're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back,
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
and we do not shy away from the difficult stuff.
Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood.
So join me on Dubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon. It's 5 o'clock on Friday, the 21st of February. Congratulations, you made it a week after Valentine's Day. This is the Martin Daubney Show on GB News with me, Dawn Neeson, and we're broadcasting live from the heart of Westminster and all across the UK. Your big stories this hour. The PM takes the fight to reform as he tells his cabinet that Labour must stop looking down on working class voters and start taking their worries about immigration seriously. Has that penny finally dropped, or is it too little, too late? And as we cosy up to Brussels, Britain will offer EU countries a youth mobility scheme, bringing tens of thousands to our country. Is this the start of that big Brexit betrayal? And in the latest case of have the lunatics taken over our asylum system, a Sri Lankan sex offender has been allowed to stay in Britain because he's gay. So is it finally time to leave the ECHR? And Labour pools mental health support cash for farmers amid the inheritance tax raid. I'll be getting the reaction from a farmer whose dad took his own life over this later in the show. So thank you for joining me this Friday afternoon. Really appreciating your company this afternoon. It is nearly the weekend, so chill and talk to me. Why not? So it's very easy to get involved in the show talking about what we're talking about or what you want to talk about. As I said, it is a Friday afternoon. That weekend's coming up, so it's time just to have a chat, isn't it? It's very easy to get involved. It's at gbnews.com/your say. But before we get cracking on an amazingly packed hour for you, let's get the news headlines with Sam Francis.
Very good evening to you. It's just after 5 o'clock. The top story this hour. Israel has accused Hamas of violating the ceasefire in Gaza after forensic tests showed a body returned from the region was not that of hostage Shiri Bibas. Her two young sons, though, were identified among the remains, along with an 84-year-old man. The Israeli Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, says Hamas put the body of a Gazan woman in a coffin and has vowed to make the terror group pay the full price. Israel is now demanding the return of Shiri Bibas, whether she is alive or dead. Well, Hamas says the mix-up may have been caused by an Israeli airstrike, and earlier journalist Amir Oren gave us his thoughts.
You have two possible hypotheses. One is that the chaos in Gaza is such that the minor organization or actually crime family who originally abducted the Bibas family and then had to give them over to Hamas misplaced the body, or perhaps Hamas later misplaced the body. The other possibility is that Shiri Bibas was abused, molested, or worse.
The BBC has pulled a Gaza documentary from the iPlayer after discovering its 13-year-old narrator is the son of a Hamas official. The broadcaster says it wasn't informed of the family connection before airing the programme and is now conducting further due diligence. It comes after Culture Secretary Lisa Nandy and high-profile media figures have urged the BBC to investigate how the film was made. The programme was removed today, with the BBC saying it won't return while the review takes place. Sinn Féin are set to boycott White House St Patrick's Day celebrations over Trump's stance on the Israel-Gaza conflict. The party leader, Mary Lou McDonald, says she won't be attending an event at the White House because of what she called a principled stance against the expulsion of the Palestinian people from Gaza. However, no invites have been officially issued just yet. Back here at home, Reform UK's Deputy Leader Richard Tice has slammed Labour, claiming they failed to take immigration seriously and dismiss working-class voters. It comes after a letter seen by GB News has revealed Sir Keir Starmer told his ministers to admit his party ignored working people's concerns about immigration. The Prime Minister says politicians have become too scared to acknowledge that some migrants are genuine refugees and some aren't. He warns Labour must stop patronising voters and counter the rise of Reform UK's policies. And he's also pledged to stand up for ordinary people who he says feel shut out and ignored by elites. And staying with politics, Labour MP Andrew Gwynn, who was sacked over what were described as vile WhatsApp messages, is now under investigation by the Parliament's standards watchdog. He was dismissed as a health minister earlier this month after sending sexist, anti-Semitic and ageist messages in a group chat with other MPs. The Parliamentary Commissioner for Standards is now probing whether his actions caused significant damage to the reputation of MPs and the House of Commons. Well, let's just bring you some lines coming to us from the Reuters news agency regarding Pope Francis. We understand he is being treated for double pneumonia, but at this stage remains stable, according to his doctor. They have just been giving a press conference. If you're watching on television, you can see their live pictures coming from the Vatican hospital, where Dr. Sergio Alfieri has confirmed the pontiff is, he says, not in danger of death, but stressed that his recovery is ongoing. They are not releasing images of the Pope during his treatment due to respect for his privacy, they say, and that the Pope will remain in hospital at least through the next week, with his condition changing daily. His doctor, though, reassured the public, saying in the last few minutes that Pope Francis is not out of danger, but not at immediate risk either. Britain is reportedly planning an Australian-style youth mobility scheme for EU countries as part of Sir Keir Starmer's reset with Brussels. The deal could see tens of thousands of young Europeans live and work in the UK for up to 3 years, with similar opportunities for Britons in Europe. But it's understood there would be a cap on numbers, despite the EU insisting mobility shouldn't be subject to quotas. A woman who claimed to be Madeleine McCann has appeared in court accused of stalking the missing girl's family. Julia Wandel was arrested at Bristol Airport on Wednesday and is charged with 4 counts of stalking involving serious alarm and distress. The 23-year-old is accused of sending messages, leaving voicemails and turning up at the McCann's home on 2 occasions. She was remanded in custody after appearing in court today and will enter a plea in April. And news from the world of tech. Well, Apple is taking the unprecedented step of removing its strongest data security feature from UK customers after the government here demanded access to user data. The changes mean iCloud storage will no longer be encrypted, making personal files accessible to Apple and law enforcement with a warrant. Apple says, though, it is gravely disappointed and warns creating a backdoor for governments could be exploited by bad actors. Privacy campaigners have also called it an unprecedented attack, while US politicians warn it could threaten intelligence sharing with the UK. Those are the latest headlines. I'll be back with you for another look at the top stories in around half an hour. Now, though, let's get straight back to Dawn.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you very much, Sam. Right, hello and welcome back, you lot. Right, packed final hour for you, so you don't want to move a muscle. Sir Keir Starmer has taken the fight to reform as he's warned his cabinet that Labour must stop looking down at working-class voters and take their words about immigration seriously. I'm sorry, makes me want to punch the TV, reading that one out myself. I'm now joined by GB News political editor Christopher Hope, who's got this exclusive in for us.
Yes.
And it's a very annoying one, Christopher. I have to say this.
It's annoying you, isn't it? Now, why is it annoying you, Dawn?
Because I don't think the Labour Party, which my dad was a union rep at FOC, should be explaining to the Cabinet what the working class are.
I think what's happening here is Sir Keir Starmer is drinking the Kool-Aid that GB News kind of consume a lot of. A lot of our viewers and listeners are worried about immigration. They think if they say anything, they're then accused of being racist. They aren't racist, they're just worried about immigration. Yeah. That's possible, but I think some on the left of politics don't think that is possible. Lots of people are getting in touch with me from on the Red Wall MPs saying this is just a start. But, you know, more to do. But he thinks that this individual who got in touch saying it's a good start, this letter. What's happened is Sir Keir Starmer has written to his cabinet. He's made clear that working Britons concerned about untramelled immigration should be listened to and not patronised. They say that, he says here, that pure economic migration was confused with genuine concern for those fleeing persecution, and we treated all migration as an untrammelled good. And that's not the case. And there's a sense of the establishment ignoring, not listening to working people. And he talks about this woman in Oldham he met, who was concerned, he says, in this letter to his colleagues in the cabinet, about young men from Europe, he says, doing antisocial behaviour in the streets, you know, messing around, being annoying. This lady felt she couldn't raise the issue with the Prime Minister until she had shown him a box of photographs showing her at a wedding with her Asian neighbours. And that meant... And he was devastated by that, the PM, because he says, why are people having to do that to have a permission to talk about immigrants who are being annoying or ripping up the neighbourhood or whatever's happening? And he says that is wrong, and it's time we listened more to these people.
Well, yeah, of course, but, I mean, the fact that he has to explain it. I mean, Yvette Cooper, immigrants welcome or migrants welcome or whatever, that sign she held up.
Back in the day.
Back in the day.
Not now.
But I mean, you wonder whether her opinion has changed that much about this.
It has, and she's trying to deal with legal and illegal migration. She does say it's changed. He takes a swipe at Reform UK and the Tories in this letter. He says he talked about a new era in politics 5 times in 1,500 words. He says that that doesn't mean to be defined by those on the right want to charge the NHS, he says, or flat taxation, as Kemi Badenoch has looked at, or cuddling up to Vladimir Putin, as some say Reform have looked at doing or got near towards doing, or cut back on rights for parents or women. So he is trying to take the fight to Reform UK, and that is interesting. Now, in terms of Reform UK, we've heard back from the deputy leader of Reform UK, Richard Tice. He says to us, quite frankly, it's concerning the PM has to tell his own cabinet to stop looking down on working-class voters.
Exactly.
That's your point too, and take immigration seriously. If this doesn't show the true colours of Labour, I don't know what does. Once again, Labour plans to use smears and lies to try and stop the rise of reform. We know it won't work. The British people have already had enough of broken promises by Labour and now want real change in the form of reform. We are coming for Labour. I think Labour recognise that reform are a challenge, and this is the start of what looks like a concerted response from Number 10.
I'm going to ask you this question, Mr Hope, because many people have pointed this out. Lots of people who are watching and listening to us today are saying they think this is a deliberate leak to reassure the Red Wall voters who are feeling a bit unloved because they are worried about immigration, the Brexit voters, etc., etc. Lots of people are a bit cynical about this one. What would you say to them?
Well, it's not a deliberate leak. I've done journalism work to get hold of the leak. I guess people who gave it to me would want this out there. That's often with leaks. Often with leaks, you have to work out who wants to get things out there, who wants to keep them secret.
Yeah.
Often, I'm very happy to take anything if it's a story.
Oh God, no,
and if it helps get, I think that's a bit kind of meta, if I say so.
Yeah.
The fact is, this is what the PM has said to his cabinet, and some people who maybe support what he's doing here want to get it out.
Mr Hope, I've seen your CV. I know, I trust you.
My CV.
Unlike some CVs we're talking. So let's bring in our Labour activist Chris Worrell on this one. Chris, you've seen the letter now. You are a working class person. You're a Labour activist. Do you feel like me it's a bit weird, the Labour Party having to explain to the Cabinet, A, what working class is, and that it's not racist to be worried about immigration?
Well, I mean, I wouldn't take any notes from Richard Tice, you know, his old money living in Dubai half the time, but I think, you know, what Keir Starmer's saying is what the voters already know. When Labour listens to working class voters, Labour will win. And I think that's clearly from Richard Tice's response there, put her back against the wall. And, you know, at the end of the day, I think with what we're doing on immigration is the right moves. So, you know, I'm happy to talk about unashamedly. We've got Mike Tapp out there as well, sort of batting British values, and I think really that's what the Labour Party want to be look like.
Have you ever been called racist, though, for saying you're worried about immigration in a Labour movement?
I've been called racist a lot. I've been Tower Hamlets politics. It just comes part and parcel with the cut and thrust of it.
It's not right, though, is it? It's not right that should happen.
No, I think when we're sort of talking about immigration, there's good. I'm married to a foreigner. Like my child's, you know, half English and half Polish. You know, and there is parts of immigration where we've got criminals. You know, I'm sure we'll come onto it that we need to deport. You know, if they're a criminal, we need to get rid of them. At the end of the day, we can't be having them in our country. But there is a lot of immigration, in my opinion, that adds to the better of our country.
OK, what about the working class bit with Labour? Do you think the fact that Keir Starmer has to explain to his cabinet what working class actually even is?
Well, let's have a look at his cabinet. I mean, it's the first cabinet that's fully only been state educated. And, you know, look at where Street is for a Stepney boy. He's come through, the world of the working class up to Cambridge. We've got others in there, Bridget Phillipson and a number of others that understand the working class. I think under Corbyn, we completely lost touch with it. You had these sort of, you know, what they call it, quinoa-eating sort of lot, Ash Sarkis and the Arabistanis, he comes on here. They had no relationship with the working class. They wouldn't ever step foot in a working men's club in their life, talking about all this nonsense. And I think what Keir Starmer's doing is bringing it back. I've seen it anyway, I believe it's there. And we're streeting everyone out on the door and on TV. I think it's a good thing telling us what's best for the country.
OK, well, just going to come back. We've got some breaking news from the last hour, actually, with US President Donald Trump, who said that Ukraine has no cards to play with. It comes as he pushes Kyiv to sign a critical minerals agreement, while Washington pursues talks on ending Russia's war in Ukraine. Speaking to Fox News, Trump added Zelensky had been at a meeting for 3 years and nothing got done. So I don't think it's very important to be at meetings. To be honest with you, he makes it very hard to make deals. Chris, what do you make of what Trump's just said? It's repeating the...
Well, he's doubling down, and it comes ahead of a huge week for European relations with the White House. On Monday, President Macron goes to the White House. Later in the week, Keir Starmer's there, trying to work out how on earth the US can be persuaded to guarantee a peace in Ukraine, but the peace on what terms? I mean, 25% of the land there is now controlled by Russia. How can you have elections in a country where 1 in 4 of the voters would live under the yoke of Russian rule? Will there be fair elections? I mean, it is very complicated, and it looks to me like Trump is undermining Zelensky when he needs all the support he can get.
Very much so. What do you make of it?
I mean, I think it's disgusting what Donald Trump's doing in this Ukraine debate. You know, we're seeing Nazi salutes getting thrown up at their CPAC. It's a bit concerning for me where we're going.
Explain what you mean by that.
Well, that was Steve Bannon, their sort of conservative, I don't know what the it stands for, the Political Action Committee. You know, you've got Musk out here, sort of another Nazi saluter, and now we're sort of seeing them...
They would say it was a Roman salute.
A Roman salute. I call it a Nazi salute. You know, spade's a spade and all that. And we're seeing, you know, them cosy up to Putin. I mean, this guy is an aggressor. He's invaded Ukraine. I think Europe is having to sort of pull its socks up now. And unfortunately, I think Keir Starmer's on the right side of this, sort of saying to Zelensky that we need to stand by them in all of this.
He hasn't yet, though, is he? We're waiting to him to commit to the 2.5% of GDP on defence. Hasn't happened yet. There's no road map to that point yet.
Well, we've seen him sort of immediately call after he was described incorrectly as a dictator. Meanwhile, and calling for elections. Meanwhile, Putin, what kind of elections has that guy had? I think the British public is on side with this. You know, we talk about Gen Z not wanting to go to war. I mean, conscientious objectors, they get found out pretty quick when we're getting into boots on the ground. And what we're seeing is Donald Trump and all of this lot causing this instability. You know, under the Biden administration, we weren't facing having to put UK troops on the ground. And now, as a result of Donald Trump and what they're pushing, when Reform are over there cheering him on, by the way, I think, we really need to think about what's in the best of British interests.
Okay.
I don't think it's that.
What do you think personally is in the best interest, then?
Well, I think we need to keep arming Ukraine. I think we need to make sure that we're putting more sanctions on Russia. And I think we do need to increase defence spending. We've got a 100% debt to GDP ratio, so we're in a rock and a hard place at the minute. But I think, there's some of the measures that we're talking about, the EU describing 700 billion, should have done that a long time ago, in my opinion. And I know that the army that we have, we need to be getting onto the drone technology and really sort of advancing that, in my opinion. I think we're in a place where we can't be left behind.
OK, Chris, we're going to leave it for now. Let's return to our discussion on the Prime Minister's leaked letter. And we are going to go and talk to Reform UK mayoral candidate Dame Andrea Jenkins. Andrea, thank you very much for joining us today. Right, leaked letter. This is what the working class are, and you're not racist if you are worried about immigration. This is what Keir Starmer finds he had to tell his cabinet just in case they weren't quite sure. What do you make of it?
Look, it's been doing this fake patriotism since even before the election, when they made sure that all their graphics had the Union flag on. I mean, we know his heart is with the EU flag, don't we, Dawn? Look at what's happened the last 24 hours. Now, I agree with what you say. You know, why I'm from a working class background, and, you know, why do they need explaining to them? But I think it's just, they're just doing this for political reasons, Dawn, because they didn't care about the working class when they raised concerns of immigration during the riots and there was locking people up for social media posts. So I think it's empty promises. This is just them trying to not lose votes, because don't forget, in a few weeks' time, we'll be going into Perda, about 3 or 4 weeks' time, and we're going into the local elections. So I think this is him trying to save face, make out that something is not. And he doesn't care about immigration. He's opening the doors to EU students now.
Andrea, do you think this is a big clue as to exactly how worried Labour are about the rise of the Reform Party?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, just as UKIP did with the Conservatives, do you remember with Brexit? I think the same is happening. They're pushing them to be a little bit more outspoken. But I'm a firm believer actions speak louder than words, Dawn, and it's okay saying these things, but his actions don't necessarily match what is coming out of his mouth.
And Andrea, how do you think he's handling the ongoing situation with the Ukraine, and treading a very fine line between keeping Zelensky happy and keeping Trump happy? How do you think he's handling that one?
No, I mean, I think anybody in that situation, I mean, I like Trump. I wanted him to win. But on this, I mean, I messaged my Ukrainian friends who I've sort of supported, the Leeds Ukrainian Society, the last couple of years, and ask what they thought about the situation. I thought it's important to get their viewpoint. And they said they want Zelensky. This is what they said to me. The lady represents the local community. And how can they have elections, just like Chris said a few moments ago, when 25% is obtained by Russia now? So it wouldn't be a fair process. And so I think really Ukraine clearly needs support, but at the same time, I would say we don't know what information Trump is getting behind the scenes as well. But I don't believe Zelensky is a dictator. Neither does the Ukrainians I spoke to in the last 24 hours.
Andrea, I mean, pretty much everybody senior in your party is now convinced that, you know, Nigel Farage is going to be the next Prime Minister. You are going to be in control. So what would Reform do in this situation now? How would they play it?
Look, you'll have to speak to Nigel about this. I mean, I think the thing about Nigel, which is a good thing, that he's said, you know, don't take everything that Trump says on face value, didn't he? You know, it said dictator doesn't necessarily mean that. I'm a firm believer that Nigel will be having chats which isn't public, which I think that's important. You know, they've built up a friendship and he can talk to him. And if anybody can be straight talking with President Trump, it would be Nigel.
Very interesting to see what happens here. Very good to talk to you. Thank you very much, Dame Andrea Jenkins there, Reform UK mayoral candidate. OK, let's see what my panel make of this. You're not a panel. You're a political genius, no. Mr. Hope. What do you make of what you've just heard Andrea say?
I think, you know, I think she's right there. You can't have an election. Nigel Farage yesterday said, of course, a path to elections. He's trying to find himself explaining what Trump means. I mean, I think Farage is right to say that Trump often says things which are outrageous to make things happen. I think the way he has handed all the cards to Putin is outrageous. Back to square one, though. Trump wants the killings to stop. We all want that. You know, is this kind of, you know, chaos merchant approach to it the way of doing it? I mean, and is there a behind the scenes some ways to stitch up Putin, as was suggested to us yesterday on the channel by military experts? There might be some method to a madness that I can't see that might be there, but it does feel as though Trump's getting all the opportunity And again, Ukraine's being undermined, I think, by the US president.
Could this be a double bluff, Chris Worrell? Or could it be Trump chucking the metaphorical grenade in and getting people doing things, getting people talking? I mean, it's certainly done that.
Well, I wouldn't put it past him, but I think what we're seeing now is, you know, Putin getting everything he wants, and him, what's the USA got in getting out of it? I think they're talking about
a lot of mineral rights by the sound of it.
Well, they're also trying to sort of cut their military expenditure, but at the end of the day, the picture's bigger than this. You've got China involved, you know, and then you've got the Indians going, and they're talking about China sort of taking a bigger role. What we've seen is China and Russia putting their pieces together. And really what they're trying to do is break Europe up and split Europe. I can't see that working with the way things are going now. I can only see Europe getting more united and working more closely together. They should have done a long time ago. But what's more concerning is you've got reform over on stages with the likes of Steve Bannon and, you know, with all these sort of crazy things being said. I just don't know whether that politics will translate to the working class anyway, at least. Because that common sense is the bottom line that people...
That point is so right, I think, Chris, because they are now ahead in the polls. They say, from Richard Tice tells us this hour, he's in a form of government. You know, who is your government? I mean, who is your work and pension secretary? Who's your culture secretary? Who's the home secretary? We know 5 MPs, don't we? That's all we know. There's so many unanswered questions, but they will be increasingly asked about Reform UK, and rightly so. Well,
we've got a few years to ask those questions, at least. Chris Worrell, thank you very much for joining. Mr Hope, thank you very much as well. Still to come, should Gazan refugees be allowed into Britain? I'm Dawn Neeson. This is GB News, Britain's news channel. We'll see you very soon.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more.
Whether it's breaking royal news, Will, please bring us up to date, or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Headliners on GB News 11 p.m. every night. It's got 3 top comedians going through the next day's newspapers so you don't have to read them, which is great.
That's a good point.
He's lying. I mean, maybe he's not lying. That's Headliners every night from 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. as well on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently. It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it? It's explosive. I mean, this is very good. It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and he did nothing.
It's controversial. And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born. It's everything you need to kickstart your evening. Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it. That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. This is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, welcome back. I'm Dawn Neeson, and this is GB News. Thank you for your company. Now, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has said Hamas will pay for not releasing Shiri Babas's body, accusing the terror group of seriously violating the ceasefire agreement. 4 bodies were returned from Gaza to Israel, including those of her children, Kafir and Ariel, 4 years old and 9 months old. There's pictures there. It comes as Sir Keir Starmer has been urged to allow Gazan refugees to come to the UK. I'm joined now by journalist Nicole Lampert. Nicole, thank you very much for joining us today. Nicole, I thought the scenes yesterday of the coffins being handed over to the Red Cross were some of the most horrific scenes I've seen, and I've actually worked in war zones and seen some pretty nasty stuff, but that was heartbreaking. For you, as a Jewish woman, what did you make of what you saw?
I think the day started horrifically and it got worse and worse, didn't it? The scenes show a highly radicalised society where with music and laughter, and people even smoking pipes. People brought their children along to come and have a look at this macabre procession where they put the 4 coffins on stage. They had music, they had children singing along to Hamas songs. And it was revolting from beginning to end. Israel had asked for, it to be done behind closed doors, for it to be dignified, and it was the absolute opposite of dignified. And even the UN, and when I say even, I mean because this is not an organisation that likes or does anything for Israel at all, but even they said it was outrageous. And then, of course, as the day went on, we learned that they hadn't, that within the coffins, they put in a body that wasn't Shiri Bibas. So it was all of the pain was prolonged and continues to be prolonged. And there's meant to be more hostages released tomorrow. No one knows exactly what's going to happen. The whole ceasefire deal is incredibly shaky, even shakier than it was before.
Now, we've seen the handovers before. This one was particularly horrific, because, as you said, it was like scenes from with irony, almost like an outdoor festival. And the thing that upset me, in particular, Nicole, was that the youngsters there, the children, clapping and cheering the coffins of other children. We know the baby was only 9 months old when he was taken. It's like, how do we move on when you've got a generation growing up who absolutely were just enjoying that like it was a party yesterday?
Well, this is one of the problems, really, with Gaza. This is a highly radicalised society. And I mentioned the UN before, and one of the reasons is the UNRWA. They're the only society in the world where they inherit refugee status. So even if your grandfather left what is now Israel in 1948, you're still a refugee. You're considered a refugee. You live in a refugee camp, even in Gaza. So these are people that are taught that as long as they keep making life as uncomfortable as possible for the Israelis, then eventually they will go, the Jews, and they don't. Well, often it's translated when there's footage from them talking about the Israelis, they're always talking about the Jews. They hate the Jews. So they're determined to get rid of the Jews. And even on that material, we see that they're saying that they want more war. It's not like this is the end of the war for them, even though the whole world is upset. What we see the destruction of Gaza. We know, thousands of people have died. And even if half of them are terrorists, there's lots of innocent people that have died, but they don't care about that. And I'm sure there are innocent people there. There are people that don't want war. There are people that want peace. But these are people that are being taught at school and onwards. It's in their school books. They learn to do maths by working out which way to send a rocket, or 2 + 2 dead Jews makes what. It's completely madness. So lots of people talked about after the Second World War and how the Germans would have to be denazified and would have to have something like that in Gaza too.
Nicole, how do you feel about our Gazan refugees coming to live in the UK?
Well, I'd feel, for the reasons I've just kind of spelt out, I'd feel incredibly uncomfortable. And I think countries such as Ireland and Spain and Norway that have all claimed that there's a genocide, they should be the ones that are taking them in. as well as, of course, their neighbours. But one of the problems, one of the reasons that Egypt hasn't taken them in, that Jordan hasn't taken them in, is because, for the reason we just talked about, they're highly radicalised. They cause problems wherever they are. They would completely disrupt either Egypt or Jordan, and they could certainly do the same for here. We all have our own problem with fundamentalism. We've had lots of terrorism in the last 20 years. I don't think we want to invite that. I'm not saying that every single person that would come is a terrorist, but I'm saying that why would we open ourselves up, particularly when there are those countries who claim to be so pro-Palestine but still close their doors to the Palestinians.
Thank you very much, Nicole. That's journalist Nicole Lambert. Thank you very much for joining us this afternoon, talking about that incredibly tough story. Now, there is lots more still to come between now and 6 o'clock. A grandmother who fled Zimbabwe with her British husband faces deportation after investing all of her money in a village butcher's shop. They join me next, and it's a story you won't want to miss. It's gobsmacking. But first, let's get those news headlines with Sam Francis.
Very good evening to you from the newsroom. 5:34. The top story tonight. Reform UK's deputy leader Richard Tice has slammed Labour, claiming they'll fail to take immigration seriously and dismiss working class voters. It comes after a letter seen by GB News has revealed Sir Keir Starmer told his ministers to admit that his party ignored working people's concerns about immigration for too long. The Prime Minister says politicians have become too scared to acknowledge that some migrants are genuine refugees, but some aren't. He also warns Labour must stop patronising voters and counter the rise of Reform UK's policies. And he also pledges to stand up for ordinary people who he says feel shut out and ignored by elites. Elsewhere in politics, Labour MP Andrew Gwynn, who was sacked over what were described as vile WhatsApp messages, is now under investigation by Parliament's standards watchdog. He was dismissed as a health minister earlier this month after sending sexist, anti-Semitic and ageist messages in a group chat with other Labour MPs. The Parliamentary Commissioner for Standards is now probing whether his actions caused significant damage to the reputation of MPs and the House of Commons as a whole. Pope Francis is being treated for double pneumonia but remains stable, according to his doctor. Dr. Sergio Alfiera confirmed the pontiff is not in danger of death, but stressed that his recovery is ongoing. The Vatican Hospital is not releasing images of the Pope during his treatment, citing respect for his privacy. And we also now know the Pope will be remaining in hospital at least through the next week, with his condition changing daily. His doctor, though, reassured the public, stating Pope Francis is not out of danger, but not in immediate risk either. Here at home, 3 men convicted in connection with what was described as a vile grooming gang in West Yorkshire will have their sentences reviewed by the Court of Appeal. That's after an MP called them pathetically short. 47-year-old Ibra Hussein and brothers Imtiaz and Fayaz Ahmed, aged 62 and 45, were sentenced last month to prison terms ranging from 6.5 years to 9 years. The case involved the abuse of 2 teenage girls in the 1990s who were plied with alcohol, drugs and sexually exploited. Following public outcry, including from local MPs, the Solicitor General has now referred their sentences to the Court of Appeal for review. And Apple has taken the unprecedented step of removing its strongest data security feature from UK devices after the government demanded access to user data. The change means iCloud storage will no longer be encrypted, making personal files accessible to Apple and to law enforcement with a warrant. Apple says, though, it is gravely disappointed and warns that creating a backdoor for governments could be exploited by bad actors. Privacy campaigners have also called it an unprecedented attack, while US politicians warn it could threaten intelligence sharing with the UK. Those are the latest headlines. A full roundup with the news at 6 right here on GB News, and Dawn will be back with you very shortly.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
The latest GB News travel. Good afternoon, I'm Johnny Ratner. Big problems continue heading south of Cambridge down the M11. The motorway is partly blocked to junction 10. Of course, the A505 Duxford exit, a lorry's broken down, I can see on camera, in the outside lane, causing long tailbacks. On the Hertfordshire stretch of the M25, one lane stays closed clockwise from junction 22 to 23 near St Albans. A car's broken down in the roadworks. On the M4 in Berkshire, the westbound entry slip is closed to junction 10. The A329M, Woking and Bracknell exit, a lorry's broken down, not being helped by a vehicle that's stalled on the westbound A329M, I can see on camera. In northeast London at Hackney, the A10 Kingsland Road, that's closed to Dalston Junction for accident investigation work. And the M20 in Kent is blocked coastbound. A coach and a lorry have collided near to junction 5 at Elsford. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
And fashionistas are keen to see which new trends are set to hit the catwalk.
Well, our next guest is very well placed to share her predictions with us after being a contestant on hit ITV series Dress the Nation, as well as being an upcycling and sewing consultant.
Wow. Joining us now is Tendai Murewe. I want to go back to you appearing on the ITV Dress the Nation.
Right.
Tell us about that experience. What was that like?
Oh, that was one of my highlights as a upcycling consultant. I learned to sew in my kitchen 5 years ago. And then, during COVID, just making masks. Then the next thing I was on a Dress the Nation, making dresses in front of TV. Yeah, it was just incredible. I think we all had all these clothes that we have, but we don't know what to do with them. So mainly I started with men's jackets, taking off the sleeves and putting it like a print on.
I've tried this. I've tried taking off my sleeves before. I now have about 3 jackets with no sleeves. I never managed to put them back on.
You need to come to a workshop.
You
need to come to a workshop.
I need an upcycling consultant. 2025. What can we expect, fashion-wise?
I think bold prints are back. People are loving. I think you walk on the streets in frollals and oversized men's jackets.
So the exact opposite. We have drastically underperformed this morning. You're just saying not like us.
We just woke up this morning and thought it's winter, it's cold, it's grey.
Grey, miserable.
Is that not the way to go?
No, it is. It's still, I think because fashion is expressive. It's whatever you want to express yourself.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Hello, welcome back. I'm Dawn Neeson and this is GB News. Now, this is a story that's really, really going to annoy you. A grandmother who fled Zimbabwe and South Africa with a British husband faces deportation after investing all £65,000 of savings into running a village butcher's shop. So let's speak now with a butcher shop owner at Meat at Robbins Farm shop, Cheryl, and her husband, Mike Robbins. Cheryl and Mike, thank you so much for joining me. Really appreciate your time this afternoon. Now, Cheryl, I mean, your story is utterly shocking. Can you just tell us briefly what has happened to you?
Okay, so I came into the country in January 2022 on a settlement spousal visa. We did all what we were supposed to do. Mike and I were separated for the first 3 years because he had to meet a financial threshold of £18,600. Once he had done that, I was able to apply. I did my English test and TB and everything. Came into the country, got my British residence permit, and I'm allowed to work but not claim benefits on that. And it's a 13-month period before we have to reapply. So the first 30 months was fine. I reapplied at the end of June last year. And because we had bought the business and we'd used up most of our savings, my application was refused. So on the grounds that we don't have £88,500 in our bank account, or one of us is not earning a salary of £29,000 per annum. Obviously, we started a new business. We totally used all our own funds. We've never got any help from anyone because we don't need to. We pay our bills and everything. But they refused that, and they insisted that, because just out of integrity, they asked the question, if you could go back to South Africa and live there. Well, obviously, I'm a South African citizen. They wouldn't turn me away. But I did put in that as well, that I can't go back because I'm over 60. I can't get work. We tried to get work before we left. And yeah, so that was refused. Sorry.
So let's just get this straight. You're here totally legally, Cheryl. You're running a small business. You're a pillar of the local community, you and your husband. You are not claiming any benefits, or you're no drain on the state whatsoever. And you have been given, I think it's February the 24th, isn't it, to appeal?
Yeah, so what happened is we put in a new application in September last year. They've kept me waiting until last week. When they sent a letter through again saying that it's refused. Our local MP, Edward Morello, has been absolutely amazing. He had a meeting with the Secretary of State, and he's really trying to side with us and stick up for my rights. And since then, I've had a letter back from the Home Office saying that they want to assess my application again. And we've had to send a whole lot of documentation through. The appeal has actually gone through today because it has to be in by Sunday, the 24th. And the thing is, what's really scary is if they decline it, I think it's either 14 or 10 days, and they will send me back to South Africa. But Mike can't join me.
As I say, so, I mean, you've been together a long time. You've been together over 25 years, from what I understand. Mike, I can see from both your faces how upsetting this is for you, and obviously incredibly stressful. You're not doing anything wrong. And at the same time as we learn about your story, we're learning that a Sri Lankan sex offender is allowed to stay in the UK because he is gay. I mean, how angry are you at the way you're being treated?
Well, the worst thing about it is that we can't plan ahead or anything. We can't run our business properly because we don't know where we're going to be tomorrow. And if they do deport Cheryl, I cannot run our business alone.
Of course.
So we've had to now basically put our business up for sale so we can try and boost our savings again and get employment. So we're literally having to abandon our business so we can satisfy the financial requirements that have been put on us.
Now, just very quickly, I understand your local MP is fighting on your behalf, but how hopeful are you that this will be resolved, happily for you?
Well, we don't know. We have absolutely no idea. It's I think the whole thing needs to be looked at on a merit basis. You know, and we're not reliant on the state or anything whatsoever.
No, sure.
We have no intention of ever doing that. We never ever came here with that in mind either. You know, it's we're hardworking people, and we love what we do. So to have this whole thing pulled from under our feet, literally, is very upsetting.
Okay, of course. Go on, Cheryl, quickly.
The mental and emotional stress, I cannot tell you.
Yeah.
It has been absolutely awful. Nightmares, sleepless nights, just not knowing if I'm going to be sent back, and we can't go together because he would have to stay here and work to send money back home.
So Cheryl, I can see the stress and anxiety etched on both your faces, and from everyone at GB News, we wish you the very best with your fight. Good luck. That's Cheryl and her husband, Mike Robbins, from Meet at Robbins Farm Shop, who are fighting, frankly, one of those insane deportation decisions while we have rapists and paedophiles and people that don't like chicken nuggets not being sent home. OK, right. A Home Office spokesman has said we are in touch with this applicant to ensure they are supported while their application is considered. Yeah, OK, whatever. Next, as Labour pulls mental health support cash for farmers amid the inheritance tax row, I'll be getting the reaction from a farmer whose dad actually took his own life over this. I'm Dawn Neeson, and this is GB News, Britain's news channel. We'll see you very soon.
Hello again. It's time for your GB News weather update from the Met Office. There will be some dry and perhaps bright weather at times this weekend, but also some heavy rain and strong winds, especially on Sunday. Currently, there's a double frontal system across the UK. That is starting to break up and ease, and so most of today's rain is also easing away. However, in the southeast, whilst it's been largely dry through today, we are going to see some heavy and persistent rain pushing in as we go through this evening and overnight, lingering into tomorrow. Elsewhere, a drier picture, though some showers towards the northwest. There will also be some clear skies, but quite cloudy for many, particularly across England and Wales. And whilst the winds have eased a bit, it is going to be quite blustery, so temperatures not dropping a huge amount for most. So a relatively mild start to the day tomorrow, and across parts of Scotland, especially towards the northwest, still quite blustery here with some fairly frequent showers, some of these a bit on the heavy side. A bit drier further east, though a few showers are possible. Across parts of Northern Ireland, particularly in the west, a few showers quite likely here first thing on Saturday. Otherwise, and across much of England and Wales, a mostly dry picture, quite a bit of cloud, but in the southeast, here we have that rain lingering. And this rain is going to be a bit heavy at times, quite persistent, particularly across parts of East Anglia and Kent, and it's going to linger here through into the afternoon before eventually clearing away. Elsewhere, and actually tomorrow looks like the driest, brightest day of the weekend, but there will be a few showers around. Some of these could be a little bit on the heavy side, especially towards the southwest. Temperatures still a touch above average for the time of year, so feeling relatively mild. As we go through into the evening, and any rain in the southeast will have cleared away, there will still be a few showers around, but most of these will die out. So a largely dry night ahead, but that dry weather doesn't last particularly long. Sunday is looking very unsettled indeed. We are going to see some heavy rain and strong winds pushing in across most places. I'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
Headliners on GB News 11 p.m. every night. It's got 3 top comedians going through the next day's newspapers so you don't have to read them, which is great.
That's a good point.
He's lying. Maybe he's not lying.
That's Headliners every night from 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. as well on GB News, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK.
We're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hello, welcome back. I'm Dawn Neeson and this is GB News. Now, the government has axed a mental health support fund for farmers despite warnings that Labour's inheritance tax rate is absolutely wreaking havoc on their livelihood. John Charlesworth was found dead on his farm near Barnsley the day before the autumn budget. Family members said John was distressed at the prospect of losing his family farm to the inheritance tax increases. It is a tough story, but we're going to do it because it's so important. John's son, farmer Jonathan Charlesworth Jr., joins me now. Jonathan, thank you so much for joining me. I'm so sorry, obviously, about your loss with your dad. Tell me what happened and how you're feeling now and how the family are coping.
I mean, it's the last 3 months has been a bit of a whirlwind. I don't think you realise how much there is to deal with when you lose somebody, and when you lose somebody to suicide. I think that is it just makes everything 100 times harder. It's it really is a nightmare dealing with it all.
And we learned today that the government have withdrawn support for mental health for farmers in general, but in particular with this inheritance tax law going through at the same time. I mean, how are you feeling? You must feel really utterly that you are being ignored. No one is listening to you.
I think ignored is quite a mild way to put it, really. I mean, they've more or less incentivised suicide by bringing in the inheritance tax with such short notice. I mean, 18 months, how do you... Somebody with a 300-acre farm that's worth, say, 3 million, they're going to have to find £500,000 if somebody dies, in 2 years' time. 18 months isn't is not anywhere near long enough to plan that sort of financial structure. So anybody now that's in the 70s, 80s, as my dad was, is going to be thinking, can I make it another 5 years till we get rid of this Labour government? Or is the easy way out, to take my own life? And I'm not promoting that by any way, shape or form, because it's the worst thing that could happen to anybody to discover a family member like that. But this will be going through people's heads. I mean, they can think, if I die after the April the 5th, where's $500,000 going to come from? You would take a 300-acre farm, they might be making $35,000 a year. That's going to take them, 15 years to sort of, if they don't take any money out of the business for themselves, they don't pay any tax. It's 15 years worth of profit. It's an impossible task, and even before the inheritance tax, mental health has been an issue in farming. I think suicide in farming is about 3 times the national average. I've worked for a few farming charities in the past up to about 2018 supporting farmers, and funding really needs to go where the farmers need it. It's all right saying there'll be extra NHS staff on, but farmers aren't going to take time out of the day to go to see
Jonathan, just very quickly, what would your message be to Keir Starmer? What would you say to him now if he was in that room with you?
Well, it's a double whammy. You've incentivised suicide and taken away the funding to help anybody that's feeling that way or got any other mental health problems. I mean, you're causing the issue in the first part. Well, not causing all of the issues, but you've certainly profounded the issues. And then you take away the funding.
Jonathan, thank you very much, and all our love to you from GB News. Unfortunately, we've run out of time. Then that's it from me today. But don't worry, Jubes and Co is up next. But first, it's time for the weather.
Heavy showers first thing will be followed by a warm, cosy day. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello again. It's time for your GB News weather update from the Met Office. There will be some dry and perhaps bright weather at times this weekend, but also some heavy rain and strong winds, especially on Sunday. Currently, there's a double frontal system across the UK. That is starting to break up and ease, and so most of today's rain is also easing away. However, in the southeast, whilst it's been largely dry through today, we are going to see some heavy and persistent rain pushing in as we go through this evening and overnight, lingering into tomorrow. Elsewhere, a drier picture, though some showers towards the northwest. There will also be some clear skies, but quite cloudy for many, particularly across England and Wales. And whilst the winds have eased a bit, it is going to be quite blustery, so temperatures not dropping a huge amount for most. So a relatively mild start to the day tomorrow, and across parts of Scotland, especially towards the northwest, still quite blustery here with some fairly frequent showers, some of these a bit on the heavy side. A bit drier further east, though a few showers are possible. Across parts of Northern Ireland, particularly in the west, a few showers quite likely here first thing on Saturday. Otherwise, and across much of England and Wales, a mostly dry picture, quite a bit of cloud, but in the southeast, here we have that rain lingering. And this rain is going to be a bit heavy at times, quite persistent, particularly across parts of East Anglia and Kent, and it's going to linger here through into the afternoon before eventually clearing away. Elsewhere, and actually tomorrow looks like the driest, brightest day of the weekend, but there will be a few showers around. Some of these could be a little bit on the heavy side, especially towards the southwest. Temperatures still a touch above average for the time of year, so feeling relatively mild. As we go through into the evening, and any rain in the southeast will have cleared away, there will still be a few showers around, but most of these will die out. So a largely dry night ahead, but that dry weather doesn't last particularly long. Sunday is looking very unsettled indeed. We are going to see some heavy rain and strong winds pushing in across most places. I'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.
Expect a warm front, moving from the kitchen right through to the rest of the house. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather.
The latest GB News travel.
Good evening, I'm Johnny Ratner. Long delays continue heading south of Cambridge down the M11. The motorway is partly blocked to junction 10. That's the A505 Duxford exit, where a lorry's broken down. On the Hertfordshire stretch of the M25, one lane's closed clockwise from junction 22 to 23 near St Albans. A car's broken down. The roadworks on that stretch not helping matters. In north-east to East London at Hackney, the A10 Kingsland Road, that's still closed just off Dalston Junction as investigation work continues following an accident around 3 o'clock. And the M20 in Kent is down to a single-lane coastbound from junction 4 to 5, the Leybourne exit towards Aylesford. A coach and a lorry collided, so recovery works taking place. There are no trains on the West Coast Main Line between Preston, Edinburgh, Waverley because of flooding, and all sailings are cancelled in Cornwall and St Mawes. And that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Want to be one of 2 lucky Great British giveaway winners? That's right, you could win one of 2 prize bundles, which includes a brand new iPhone 16, £500 in shopping vouchers to spend in your favourite store, and an incredible £10,000 in tax-free cash to spend however you like. What would you spend that cash on? For another chance to win, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus 1 standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. Call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge, or post your name and number to GB11 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 7th of March. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more. Whether it's breaking royal news, Will, please bring us up to date, or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good evening, it's 6 o'clock. Welcome to News & Co with me, Bev Turner, tonight in for Michelle. So, we're going to kick off with the GB News exclusive. We have seen a private letter sent by Sir Keir Starmer to his cabinet urging them to stop talking down to you about the important issue of immigration. This letter tells us a lot about this government. Some of it is quite chilling. Over in America, Donald Trump and Elon Musk have been throwing linguistic grenades into Ukraine, accusing Zelensky of running a, quote, fraud machine feeding off the dead bodies of soldiers. Is this sort of rhetoric helpful or not? Because surely everybody wants this conflict to end. And I know a lot of you out there love Ben Habib. You were disappointed when he left the Reform Party over its structure. Well, they've changed it this week. He must be delighted. He's on the panel tonight, so stay here to find out. And besides Ben this evening, who is now, of course, the chairman of Great British PAC, is going to be Joe Phillips, journalist and former press secretary to Paddy Ashdown. First, though, here's your latest news headlines.
Bev, thank you, and a very good evening to you. The top story tonight at 6. Reform UK's deputy leader Richard Tice has slammed Labour, claiming they failed to take immigration seriously and dismiss working-class voters. It comes after a letter seen by GB News reveals Sir Keir Starmer told his ministers to admit that his party ignored working